order the meeting of the Town of Pittsburgh Commissioners for Monday, February the 12th, 2018. And as is our custom, we'll begin with one recess. Thank you.
To the flag of the United States of America, and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you.
Thank you. We have agendas before us, and is there a motion to approve the agenda as proposed, or a motion to make a modification to the agenda?
I'd like to make one modification. This is to pull the Hearn Road, item number 5, to make it, I think we can call this old business. Put it old business number 1. Just a quick question.
All right. Any other changes?
I'd like to make a change to the agenda under old business and place a special item agenda after park fund.
Those two changes, is there a motion to approve the regular agenda and the consent agenda? So moved.
Second.
Moved by Bette Wilson Foley, seconded by Michael Fiocco. Those in favor, please indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
Those opposed. Motion carries unanimously. We have a number of people signed up for citizens matters this evening, and so let us go directly into the public expression period. Those people who have signed up are requested to state their name and their address, and to speak for approximately 3 minutes. The matter, we generally have had a rule in place that matters that dealt with items on the agenda would not be public expression opportunities, but the board has talked, and we are waiving that requirement for tonight with respect to certain items simply because of the way they came up quickly for discussion. So, the first person to sign up, and I'll give you a sign when you're approximately 3 minutes to go. And we're going to devote about 20 minutes to public expression overall. So the first person to sign up is Paul Baragona. Paul, come to the podium, please. And state your name and address, please.
Paul Baragona, 87 North Wickham Drive in Pittsburgh. It's in Powell Place across from Lowe's. I'm here to just make a few brief comments concerning the proposed apartment complex in Powell Place on the north side of the big lake, the one with the fountain. The only objection I have, and it's going to be a beautiful complex, and I'm glad the man's selling it because he gets some money out of it, but the only objection that I have, and 90% of the objections in our neighborhood, is to the increased traffic that's going to be during what you would call rush hours on Millbrook Road, which is the primary and only entrance into Powell Place. The road is already too narrow for 3 cars to pass unless the 2 moving vehicles are subcompacts, because most of the people living on Millbrook park in the front of their house, even though they have 2-car garages in the back. It's just the way it is. But my proposal, if they can do it, is to cut a little 25-foot road off the northeast corner of the lake, go behind it so that the people in the apartments, we're talking 500 cars. 500 cars. Just 2.5 times the number of cars in Powell Place right now, as far as I know. Either building on the road so that the apartment tenants don't have to use Millbrook at all, including the new hotel, which is in the future plan. That's going to add even worse traffic. They have a little road going on the northeast side of our neighborhood from the first cul-de-sac when you first come in from behind the Exxon station. none of that traffic would affect Millbrook. But if that can't be done, I think the only alternative would be to require the people who live on Millbrook to not park in front of their house during rush hour. That could be something like 6:30 in the morning till 8:30, and then from 4:30 in the afternoon to 6:30 p.m. If there were no cars parked on Millbrook during those hours, I don't think we'd have a problem. Thank you.
Thank you, Paul Barragona. The next person signed up is Peter Thayer. Peter.
Good evening. At a meeting Preston Development held at Chatham Mills in 2013, I spoke to a Thomas D'Alessandro about my concerns with sedimentation and erosion during construction of Chatham Park. He told me Preston Development is a state-of-the-art developer. Jim Goodnight cares so much, and Preston is extremely sensitive to environmental issues. He told me it will not happen, not to worry. So I've been documenting off-site sedimentation impacting the Haven Creek wetlands and even the Haw River, which is a few miles downstream from the Northern Business District for 4 years. I went out most every time it rained, and every time I did, I was shocked at what I found. I was not told the truth. Preston Development, Chatham Park Investors, is just like the folks who did Westfall, Chatham Ridge, the parks, and the Legacy. They don't really care. So the caring part is left to you guys. You guys have feelings, and you're from Chatham, and you're important to the community, and the community cares, about what you guys do. Chatham County learned some hard lessons from the Bunky Morgan era, and I can't understand why Pittsboro will not learn from the mistakes Chatham made back then. Please buffer ephemerals, seeps, and springs. Chatham County has done that for a good reason. And please consider hiring a consultant to promote and protect your and our interests. Chatham Park investors could care less. Period. Thank you.
Thank you, Peter. The next person to sign up was Karen Hall. Karen?
Thank you so much. My name is Karen Hall. I live at 4157 Austin Chapel Road. And I am here tonight to talk about some streets that are in Pittsboro. My business partner and I, Catherine Deininger, were at the Robinson Creek Watershed Council meeting earlier, and we were talking about some of the work that Catherine and I are doing in Siler City with the town of Siler City. A lot of Siler City has been built on top of streams, and so it's been culverted, piped, and lots of buildings on top of these streams. And we're working with the town and with some private landowners right now at Park Shopping Center in Siler City on a preliminary study to determine if we can daylight one of the streams that goes underneath a parking lot there, with the thought of it being actually a linear park that continues on from Bowling Lane Park. This is over by the Piggly Wiggly. They have a lot of flooding issues. And so we were talking to the Robinson Creek members about the work we're doing in Siler City, and we started thinking about the streams that are actually in downtown Pittsboro, and there are a couple that have actually been culverted. One is under the Pittsboro Station, I think, so that has buildings on it, so that's not an option. But we were also thinking about possibly the one that's underneath the old Ford dealership lot. That is a stream that's been culverted, and so we were kicking around the idea of if one of the things, whoever owns the land, a possibility might be a little bit of open space that we could do a study to potentially see about if it's feasible to daylight that stream and make it a linear park, which would be seeing the stream as it flows and having a little trail, an educational trail that goes by the stream, and people can have picnic benches and things like that. This is the same stream that actually is going from the Ford's lot down past where the concrete, I think it's Chandler Concrete, is back behind Chandler Concrete, and eventually into Robinson Creek. And there's the really nice Greenway Trail that's down there, and there's the really pretty wooden bridge that goes across this creek. But I just wanted to bring that to the town's attention as a possibility, the work we're doing in Siler City, and just making our streams an amenity in Pittsburgh when thinking about linear parks. So I wanted to bring that up.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
And I enjoyed that meeting tremendously and thought the concept of daylighting streams was fascinating.
Thank you.
One of you would like for a park too, right there
Yeah.
next door.
Yes.
That'd be really nice.
It would be really pretty. Thank you.
Emily Sutton?
And I also have a photo if Brian could pull up those photos that I gave. So I'm Emily Sutton. I'm the Haw River Keeper. And my address is, my office building is 143 Bynum Hill. So these photos, you guys may be familiar with it. Peter Tsai sent them to us all a couple months ago. So first of all, thank you for allowing the time for public comment and for allowing us to speak on agenda items. I will only be touching on the stormwater element a little bit, but I'd like to discuss water impacts already seen on the activities within Chatham Park. So Havens Creek wetlands have been drastically impacted by the initial phases of development of Chatham Park off Russet Run Road. Wetlands have a tremendous ability to filter nutrients and sediment from waterways, and they supply sensitive terrestrial and aquatic wildlife with essential habitat for their life cycles. As the development in this phase has increased, these wetlands have repeatedly been filled with sediment, which suffocates those sensitive species and inhibits the plant's ability to uptake nutrient loads. As increased levels of nutrients are carried through the sediment loads into the stream and the wetlands, the plants in the waterways are unable to uptake those nutrients as they are drowned in silt. The confluence of Havens Creek and the Haw is about 5 river miles north of Jordan Lake. As our dependency on Jordan Lake as a drinking water supply increases, our stake in the nutrient management of the lake will also increase. Each development within these subwatersheds will change the hydrology and the nutrient levels discharged into the Haw and Jordan Lake. Will the cost of water treatment of these impacted waterways outweigh the benefits of this development? If Havens Creek is any example of what can be expected, the implications of this development will be felt for decades to come. Because violations are only issued for impacts within the footprint of that development, Chatham Park has not been held responsible for the devastating impacts on Havens Creek wetlands. Effects of sedimentation and polluted runoff do not adhere to property boundaries or project footprints. And as we know, climate change is creating larger storm events and flooding. Designing for the 10-year storm event in a landscape of impervious surface will create major problems in the future as more 100-year and even 500-year floods occur. In 4 letters addressed to the town between 2013 and 2017, the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service voiced important concerns on this development and the impact it will have on endangered species. Those concerns have not been addressed. I'll just quickly quote one requirement. There were 1 of 6 requirements from that letter. One of those 6 says, for new developments draining to the Haw exceeding 6% imperviousness, the town of Pittsburgh requires the developer to include stormwater controls designed to replicate and maintain the hydrographic condition at the site prior to the change in landscape. So that would mean 0% change in flow rate. So Pittsburgh has an opportunity to set a precedent for requiring protective measures on surface and drinking water quality. It cannot be denied that the effects of this development will change the town of Pittsburgh. I hope you will consider our concerns about the development currently taking place as you consider how the future development will occur. Thank you.
Thank you. Next is Howard Piper.
My name is Howard Pfeiffer. I live at 653 Spindlewood, Pittsburgh. Good evening. I've lived here for about 1 year. Perhaps some folks here think that disqualifies me from having much of an opinion about Pittsboro, but what I have to say is more important than who I am. It has to do with the monument in front of the historic courthouse. Pittsboro is fortunate to have unique historical resources. Clearly, that history is important to you, as evidenced by your Main Street project. As we all know, at the same time as that project is underway, major development is also coming to town. Thus, we have two valuable assets that must both be nourished here. I've seen your attention to detail regarding both planning for growth and historic preservation, so I know you are up to the task. But I've come here tonight not only to offer you praise that's due, but also to criticize. Specifically, I refer to the presence of that monument. This monument glorifies white supremacy. It is now and always has been something that stands in the way of progress for the town and its citizens. Its presence blocks black and white citizens from the chance to regard each other with mutual respect. It is well past the time to eliminate this barrier for the good of our town and its people. You know, it was not that long ago that we witnessed firsthand how harmful perceived bigotry is to economic growth and development. We saw it on a statewide level with the disgraceful HB2 bathroom law, which was recently amended. However, the negative attention it gathered still reverberates. This part of North Carolina is, as we know, on the short list of locations vying for a second Amazon headquarters. And now we have activists in other competing areas urging the company to take into consideration the lack of legal protections for the LGBT community in North Carolina. They asked Amazon the question, why choose to build here and expose some of your 50,000 employees to laws which do not offer equal protection to gays and lesbians? Now, it remains to be seen how much of an impact this has on its decision-making process, but it is part of the context which will be considered. With the monument, we have something that can be considered very similar. The last thing our town needs is to be identified with a monument that glorifies an evil and brutal past. White supremacy is not something to celebrate. It is not part of a formula for success. It is not a historical event or person as depicted by the bona fide historic markers and plaques seen throughout the town. And so today, February 12th, the birthday of Abraham Lincoln, let us recommit ourselves to his ideals of unity and equality by acknowledging that the time has come to embrace the future and remove the monument from our town's public land. Thank you.
Thank you. Lisa Clement.
My name is Lisa Clement. Excuse me. I live at 650 Millbrook, and I just want to make a couple of comments about the proposed apartments in Powell Place. First of all, I'm not anti-development at all. I'm very much excited about a lot of the things that are happening here. It's one of the things we can see from the news for a year. But I do think it's very important how developments are done, hopefully in a manner that adds value to the community, not just in terms of money or property values.
Excuse me, Lisa, could you speak up just a little
I'm sorry,
bit?
my voice is really going tonight. Not just in a manner that adds monetary or property values, but that adds to the overall well-being of the community, of the people who live there. A couple of things that are most concerning about the proposed development are serious safety concerns regarding the ability of Millbrook, of the street, to handle another 450 to 500 cars per day. There's already a lot of issues in terms of in not supporting the people who live there. The second thing that I want to talk about is the design. At the meeting we went to, they showed us photographs of, I don't know if it's the exact drawings of what they're going to build, but they were just basically generic cookie-cutter, large 3-story buildings. With no buffer, no landscaping. And it didn't seem like there was any attempt that had been made to blend the apartment development into the existing neighborhood or actually make it a part of the community that's here, a part of Powell Place. And I just wanted to read, these are the architectural guidelines for Powell Place. I just want to read number 1. Architectural diversity is very important to Powell Place. Colonial revival, Greek revival, Queen Anne and Craftsman style detailing is strongly encouraged, along with other architectural styles which are reflective of Pittsboro and Chatham County and the other local historically compatible architecture. These varied details and architecture help achieve the diversity and classic older neighborhood features, which is a highest priority at Powell Place. So I would hope that the developers and the builders would take into concern the neighborhood. They are going to stick this, my word, monstrosity right down in the middle of an existing neighborhood. So, thank you.
Thank you. Judy Betterton? If you could speak directly into the mic. that'd be
Okay,
helpful.
I will.
Thank you.
Thank you for listening to our concerns tonight. My name is Judy Betterton. I live at 615 Millbrook, and that's in Powell Place. There's one long road that comes into our section of Powell Place, so you can visualize the neighborhood, at least my end of it, as being like a box canyon. We already have traffic issues and safety concerns, but with adding this development that will put another 500 cars on that road, it becomes impossible for those of us who live down at the box end of the box canyon to safely get out in case there is any kind of event that would cause us to have to leave the neighborhood. Not long ago, there was a fire down near the Mary Holmes Barber Park that is next to our neighborhood, and the woods go all the way up along the back of Millbrook, the alleyway behind our house, and had that fire spread up toward us, there would have been no feasible way for us to get out of the neighborhood, except possibly, with the number of cars that are there already, it is a problem. If you put an additional huge number of cars on that road, none of us are going to be able to get out in case there's a fire, some kind of chemical spill on 64, which is right below us, some kind of nuclear event over at Jordan Lake that we might be impacted by, a fire amongst the houses, which anybody who has been in our neighborhood, it's a lovely neighborhood, houses are very close together. If some of the houses catch on fire, residents will not be able to get past the point where the fire is occurring. And I started thinking about, when that fire happened down by the park, I started thinking about, well, how would we get out of our house safely out of this neighborhood? There would be no point in getting in our car because it would be such a bottleneck that we wouldn't be able to get out at all. So the best solution would actually be to, with cats in the carrier, and I actually just bought a rolling, sort of a large rolling grocery cart that I can put 3 cat carriers in. The only way to get out of there would be to go down through the woods and brush across from us behind Powell Springs Senior Apartments to get to the road. So, and then we would be on the highway, which would not be good either. So I am formally presenting a petition from the residents of Powell Place. Over 250 homeowners in Powell Place object to this apartment development and ask that there be safety studies done, traffic studies done, etc. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Tanya Papandrea?
Good evening. My name is Tanya Papandrea. I live at 45 Evandale Lane in Powell Place as well. I am here also to comment about the apartments that are currently proposed. I am also in agreement with many of the comments that my neighbors have made this evening as well. And so just have a few things that I would like to have you all consider when this comes before you. Again, like the other neighbors have mentioned, the big concern is the traffic on Millbrook, and that it's already congested, and that to handle another 500 cars, we would really like to see if you would consider doing a traffic study before this could happen. And also the issue of if there were a fire or even an emergency in somebody's home and an ambulance or fire truck needs to come in, is there going to be access for them to be able to get through? So if there could be some sort of check with the fire marshal if they're able to get to every house in the neighborhood safely and easily. And again, the main concern is that there's only one entry and exit point. And so if they have an additional 500 cars, if they had their own entrance, that would certainly help alleviate a lot of the concerns that we have. And also, since I live on Evandale Lane, and this is right behind, it's literally in my backyard, green buffers of substantial size and depth are also of concern, and I think very important to help keep the neighborhood the way it looks. And to the other point already made, that they should be required to also follow the architectural guidelines of the rest of the neighborhood. They shouldn't just be able to put up a building that doesn't fit along with the aesthetics of the rest of the housing in there. And then also the other concern I know is also our concern without the development is the parking on Millbrook. And that is an issue that has tried to, needs to be worked out separate from this. But with the additional cars, they're not allowing for enough parking spots in the apartments. So that's going to give an additional overflow for parking. So then potentially for the developer to consider giving up some of their land to supply some additional parking as a proposal to maybe alleviate some of the parking issues. So I'm not against the development either. I'm very excited about change and development to the area, but again, I feel like it's up to you all to make sure it's done properly and that due diligence is done to make sure it's safe for everyone involved.
Thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
Efrain Ramirez?
Good evening, y'all. My name is Efrain Ramirez. I've lived at 250 Tom Lake Drive for the past 32 years. I have a beautiful piece of property, 3 wooded acres next to Town Lake, and it's green, water on Robertson Creek. It is very nice, but I have to leave my property every now and then, so I go through town. You have received my memo. I'm here to whinge and moan and groan about the appearance of Pittsboro. I am really tired of seeing some of the ugliness that has encroached upon our town center. I don't like, for example, these kite sail flags that float over everywhere. They go from one end of town through the center to the other, and they run north and south. There's even a church who is advertising with one of these things. You know what a kite sail is? You're surfing on board with a sail that makes you go faster. That's what these things remind me of. They're really ugly. They're everywhere. And I don't see, somebody has to have made a lot of money promoting these things in town, because it seems everybody has caught on to it and wants to fly it. I don't like it. I know that y'all cannot do a lot about the truck traffic on 15501 north and south. I have to drive out into that, and these things are humongous. There's one company who drives a large truck almost every hour, 24 hours a day. I know it's necessary for 3M to get their shingle rocks up to wherever they go, but they go through my town. I don't like it. You mentioned in a response to me that the DOT is no longer considering the 15501 bypass. I think that is distressful. I am hoping, maybe since Pittsboro is not big enough, large enough, doesn't have enough cachet with the legislature and the DOT to get them to pay attention to us. They put in the 64 bypass, why can't they do the other one? I mean, if we don't have enough pressure, maybe the people who are building Chatham Park, they seem to have lots of influence. Maybe they can put some pressure on the DOT to consider a side bypass. I remember driving down Hillsborough Street at one time when the street is washboard. You had to bump, because every time these guys put on their brakes, they'd start to turn over the asphalt. It was fixed, but for how long will this be fixed? There are many things in Pittsboro that I like. I have been here for a long time. I saw it when I first looked upon this place. I knew this is where I was going to live, and I've been here all that time. I love what some people have done. This gentleman, he's right here, what he has done with the roadhouse, which was started before he took it over, but he has considered the beautification of the roadhouse. There are plants and flowers around the side. The ABC store is a very attractive place to look at. Belladonna's took a crappy old Pizza Hut and turned it into a very attractive restaurant. Is my time? Well, you got my memo. You know what I'm going to complain about. See if you can fix it. Make it better looking. Thank you.
Thank you. Debbie Cannell?
Good evening. Hi, I'm Debbie Snell. I'm at 282 Moore Mountain Road, Pittsboro. So I've been sending some emails to you and trying to talk on this issue of the 2,000-foot buffer that is in Pittsboro's land use plan. So I wrote out another few paragraphs just to kind of bring it again to your attention. The town of Pittsboro's land use plan speaks to the conservation area along the Hall River, including the floodplains and the designated 2,000-foot wide buffer. This buffer is consistent with Chatham County's low-density stream buffers, which limits the density to be 1 house per 5 acres. Development is discouraged in this area. The public is waiting to observe the town's board holding to this land use plan. We are astonished that the board members are not able to stand behind the Pittsboro's own land use plan, which was done in 2012. The U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service sent multiple letters to the town of Pittsboro, and it just seems like there's no foothold. You are unable to stand behind your own plan, and that is confusing. It appears that the revised stormwater, tree protection, and open space additional elements will not meet the condition of zero hydrographic change. What's the impact of the new development? Even if it's just 1 house per 5 acres, which is not part of the plan of Chatham Park. It's the water that drains into the Hall River. What's going to happen with that? You will be permitted disturbance and destruction within the 2,000-foot area along the river, in contrast to holding your own land use plan. The public is depending on you, our leaders, and to be good stewards and protectors of our natural resources. Life within this ecosystem is critical, and we are all part of that ecosystem and its watershed. The rural characteristics of Chatham County and Pittsboro should be valued beyond the profit of one party. This ecosystem along the river is well worth protecting for the citizens and the generations to come. Will you as a board use the stormwater, tree protection, and open space elements to reinforce and show your intentions through voting and guiding the elements and the UDO to reach the goal of and these are the words that were used by the town, exemplary and exceptional. The town of Pittsboro promised to protect the critical area, and they put it in your own land use plan. So do it. Keep the promise and keep the adopted plan. Hold to the 2,000-foot conservation area buffer along the river within the elements. You need to stand, plan, and follow through on this. Then Pittsboro can truly partner with Chatham Park to create a live, play, and work city that is exemplary and serves all. Thank you.
Thank you, Dennis. The 11th person to sign up, I'm afraid I cannot read their name. Perhaps it begins with Jane. Or perhaps it's just closed out. Is there anyone else that was hoping to speak during this period? And we will assume it was the mayor. Okay? Thank you very much. We will now proceed on the next item on the agenda, the commissioner update. This is a time generally when I speak about the meetings that we have been to as we have attended the town business. I continue having weekly meetings with the town manager. except recently when he was at a conference. On the 25th of January, I met with several of us met with Powell Place residents and apartments regarding the apartment complex that has been discussed tonight. The same day, the 25th, attended the Robertson Creek watershed meeting. On the 28th, attended the Chatham County History event and another history session that afternoon at the Cidery. On the 29th and 30th, I met with various concerned citizens and the developer of an Eagle Service gas station. And on the first day of February, could we have quiet in the hall? Met with the County Affordable Housing Group along with Mayor Pro Tem Pamela Baldwin. On the 8th of February, took a morning with the TARPO, the Transportation Planning Group, and had further discussions with the Powell Place apartment developer and joint board. On the 9th of February, attended a Keep America Beautiful meeting with the recycling staff of the county. And on the 11th, attended, this was a really tough day. I attended the chocolate cake bake-off at the senior center, where commissioners and the sheriff and Percy and I were just talking a little while ago about how we're still suffering from high sugar blood as a result of that event. So, are there other updates from commissioners who might have attended PBA, Fairground, Main Street, climate change meetings?
Well, Main Street update is this evening, so I won't steal any of that thunder. And obviously the PBA also wants to use the town hall parking lot for Sunday. So.
I mentioned that several of us, including you, attended the Joint Olympic Commission.
We had quorum.
You mentioned everything.
The County Climate Change Advisory Committee meeting is where I was on February 1st. And the action plan has been finalized, and I need to get that to this board, get a copy to this board. It may be of interest to members. Additionally, a couple of members of that committee were very intrigued by our having passed the resolution in support of federal action on carbon fee and dividend, recognizing that was just a recommendation for consideration. I shared that resolution with that committee. There were some tasks divided, and I'll be on soil carbon. So that's it for that committee.
Thank you, Curly. Okay, we're next to old business now. Main Street, Pittsboro update. Maria Parker Lewis.
So this is the Hearn Road water main replacement project. And a couple of meetings ago, it was proposed to be a 6-inch water line. And I had noticed that in some of our long-term studies that we had called for a 12-inch water line in 2025, I think it was. And that was due, I think, a lot to the fact that there was substantial development proposed for the area. Now, that development has gone away, but we do have substantial development in that area. And I think it would be prudent to do a model to see if the 8-inch that is now proposed instead of the 6-inch is the result of that modeling, or should we be putting in a 12-inch line? And I don't think that's part of this study. Brian, if I'm missing it, please let me know, and or if in fact we've already done enough study to determine 8 inches adequate. But it's not in his head.
I'll give this a try.
You're correct. When you mentioned the 12-inch, I went back and checked, and I found it. And I dug into it, and I spoke to Hydrostructures, who is the author of that study, and I asked them what was the reason for that 12-inch, and it was an older land use plan that is no longer planned. Then I went back to the Chatham Park engineers who are studying future water in that area for Chatham Park, and they indicated there's no plan to put a 12-inch that far north or west. There might be a 12-inch below that on a road like the Parkway extension in the future, but there was nothing. Then I had a meeting to confirm that what I was hearing was correct. So we had a meeting with Chatham Park and Hydrostructures and our staff, and we looked at different land use plans, and we all came to the conclusion that Hearn Road itself was not associated with any future main water trunk system that's contemplated in the future, but that since we may loop it eventually, that's when we talked about upping it to an 8 off Bynum Road, and then eventually it would wrap back around to 15501 near the water plant.
So you don't think that's going to connect with Chatham Park in the future?
No. Okay. They're very clear that wasn't in their plan way off in the future.
Okay. Great. I appreciate you guys
Sure.
looking into it.
Certainly.
Come to that determination.
Is there a motion then?
Motion to approve. Second.
Moved by Michael Fiocco, seconded by Jay Farrell. Those in favor, please indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
Those opposed. Motion carries unanimously. The next matter is the text amendment for accessory dwelling units. Ms. Victoria Bailiff. Main Street. Very Main Street. We keep trying to get you off the agenda here.
What do I do with this?
If you want to advance the slides, or I can.
Okay.
Has it turned on?
Did I just do that? Or did you?
Oh, yeah, you did. That's okay. Just look at me when you want to advance.
Okay. Okay. So first, thank you for letting me come before you and give you an update. I need to say thank you for your support, because just about everything you're going to see tonight wouldn't have happened without the town's support. So I thank you for that. Over the last year, Main Street has organized based on the 4 points of the Main Street approach, which is organization, design, promotions, economic vitality. Up until this point, we've been functioning primarily as a design committee through the facade improvement grant program. And about 2014, when the town adopted the vision for downtown Pittsboro, we started coordinating meetings with the public and with business owners, with property owners, to discuss that vision. And also when the Circle project was coming about, we were organizing meetings, and it generated a lot of interest. And those projects themselves, plus the interest, it led us to the point where we realized we had to really embrace this program and go ahead and organize based on all 4 of those points. So the first thing we did was, we organized. We formed a board. Jim Nass is the chair of this organization committee. There are currently, I believe, 11 members of the board. You can see our names listed there. At that point, we contracted with the foundation group so that we could start working on filing for a 501c3 status and incorporating. We did obtain our EIN. We opened a bank account with SunTrust. We contracted with a company in Raleigh called Reify to help with branding and the development of website. We're working on processes and procedures. And as I said, we've organized these 4 committees. So our design committee, continuing its work, we coordinated with the town, working with John to obtain the historical and seasonal boulevard banners.
To the left, you'll see the two images of the historic Pittsboro banners. The one to the most left is the banner that we've had, and I'm not exactly sure when that came into use. But they were frequently seen faded, in tatters, half hanging, half up. It was time to really get some new banners up. We looked for the original artwork. We couldn't find it. We even contacted the original artist. She no longer has the original artwork. So Leslie Landis has worked to keep the original elements because we didn't want to rebrand anything. It's not about rebranding. If the town wants to do that, the town can do that. But we wanted to keep the same elements, the same message. We wanted to give a nice, clean welcome, let people know where they are when they're coming off of our corridors. So that is happening, and you went. Thank you. No, we're still on the banners. Actually, they are due to be in on the 23rd of this month, so you can look for those. Also, we are working towards seasonal banners. Our first season was the holiday season. We were hoping to have these in for this holiday, but there were problems with the materials, so we're not going to have those until the next holiday. In addition, sorry, Brian, I'll hurry through this as fast as I can.
No, I didn't. I think I talked by accident.
Okay.
You have the clicker there.
Okay. So we've been coordinating with the town and CCCC and also the county because we know that we wanted to get rid of all those ugly posters on our utility poles, and we have the kiosks. So the design committee worked to place those kiosks around town. And then we worked with Fred on the rain garden, meeting with property owners and business owners, and also Sal, so that we could all be working on the same page and speaking the same language as to what we wanted to see on that northwest corner. And we're working on developing recommendations on the building materials for the historic downtown. Okay. Continuing with the design committee, we're working on an overlay district. This is going to be a huge project, and it's going to require a lot of input. We're just in the baby stages of this right now. Another project is we're partnering with the Chatham County Artists Guild to identify and develop public art opportunities. We're hoping that the northwest corner could be one of those opportunities. And then we're partnering with the Chatham County Historical Association to place historic markers on downtown buildings and develop a walking tour. This is just an example. Again, we're in the beginning stages of this. The idea is to gather stories about some of our historic places, and then provide a walking map and maybe even an interactive tour on our website. Okay, our promotions committee, they've probably been the most active. The very first thing that we've done is we've developed a logo that you can see right here, and then a website. Brian, can you?
Would it be possible to go back to that? I'm having computer trouble, so we can circle back after you run through the slides.
Okay, sure. Okay. So we've also promoted downtown Pittsboro through advertisements in Our State and Chatham Magazine, and we've also held week-long radio ads with WUNC. We've increased our social media presence, and if we were able to go on the website, you could see some of what's going on, the conversations that are happening there. We staffed a photo booth at the street fair, and we were able to take surveys to get some kind of ideas of what people are thinking about Pittsboro and what they hope to see in downtown Pittsboro moving forward. And then we also launched a slogan contest for Main Street Pittsboro, and the winner of that contest was Jamie, and her slogan was "Find It in Pittsboro." We've used this for our Shop Small advertising, and we use it during our tree lighting, and we think that it can just be used in many different ways, whether a local shop owner wants to say, where can you find, local jewelry? Well, you can find it in Pittsboro. Where can you find great food and live music? You can find it in Pittsboro. And it can also be used in a broader way, too, where can you find a community that loves to come together and celebrate the holiday? I don't know, you can find it in Pittsboro. So we think that's got many uses. In addition, our our promotions committee has been working with community events. As I said, we were in the street fair. We sponsored events hosted by the Pittsburgh Business Association, and those would be the Summerfest, the tree lighting celebration, Small Business Saturday, and Miracle on Hillsborough Street. And because of the sponsorship of Main Street Pittsburgh, the Pittsburgh Business Association was able to donate $1,000 to communities and schools through the Miracle on Hillsborough Street event. That is always a charitable event. And I'm trying to go quickly because I know you have a lot, but I hope I'm not going too quickly. Okay, economic vitality. They work very closely with Postal Fish, and we're kind of a liaison between the company themselves and the town, helping to work through issues to get them open as quickly, efficiently as possible. They're maintaining public awareness through articles. We've had an article, I'm trying to think, is it every month now for the past 3 months in the county line? They've also put inserts in the papers to promote our downtown events. Surveys were conducted, as I said, at the street fair, trying to get a pulse on what people want. And we will be hosting a winter mixer for property and business owners so that we can share our vision with them and receive their input. And I believe Randy presented you at the last meeting with a spreadsheet on all the properties in our downtown district. Okay, ongoing. We're continuing to develop relationships with organizations. An example, as I said, was that mixer. We're seeking and promoting community input. We will be holding more mixers. Also, we're going to conduct surveys. We're finding different ways that we can use our website to gather input. And we're always looking for any volunteers on any of our committees. And I don't know, was it Mr. Ramirez? I don't know if he's still here. We'd love to talk to you.
You signed up already.
Oh, wonderful. Beautiful. Thank you. Identified downtown projects and, as I said, surveys. And lastly, Doug Emmons was going to present a little bit on our budget. I will say that we just held our first regular meeting in January. Doug Emmons has stepped down as our treasurer, and Steve Shirkus is now our new treasurer. But Doug is to present, and we thank you, Doug.
Good evening. I'm Doug Emmons. I just wanted to share briefly at one slide. So I'm going to share with you an update on our budget. And I want to thank you again. You've done a phenomenal job in funding Main Street. I feel that we're off to a very good start. This current fiscal year, the town funded us to the tune of $65,000, 15 of which is for facade improvements. That falls within our design line item. Overall, we're just about at, I think, 47% spending year to date. This was compiled just after the beginning of January. So we're pretty close to where we want to be for the year. We've got each of the committee chairs assembling their forecast for the second half of the year and planned expenditures. There's been some done since I've been away for the last week as to what is in the pipe. I've recently recruited Steve Shirkus to join the board. He's going to become the new treasurer. He's a gentleman that I've known for several years. He's moved into my neighborhood over the last several years. Served as an international finance manager and director for Sikorsky and United Technologies. So he's very well versed in financial procedures and has already started drafting some financial procedures for how we can work better with the town. So we've currently drafted an MOU back in December. We've submitted that to the town for Brian's consideration. We're going to try to meet over the next week so that we can put together a more formal process for how we can review this with you on a more regular basis. And our hope is that we can do that post-haste and provide you an ongoing update on what we're doing and how we're spending the money that you're providing us. Any questions at all on this? If not, maybe we can go to the website.
There's one more thing I forgot to mention before we talk about the website, was at our last meeting you voted to allow us to expand our boundaries. And since then, we have a business that is now within our boundaries, and they have applied for the facade improvement grant. So there's one good thing that happened right away from that, so thank you. I won't take up too much more time, but I want you to see first and foremost right up there is Join Our Circle. Again, we are looking for board members, committee members, or just volunteers. If you scroll down a little bit, I'm not going to walk you through every page, but you can see we have a gallery, and then, shoot, I thought you were going to be able to see. Can you go back up, Brian? Oh, well, there it is, the Facebook, the Twitter, and the Instagram. We also have a blog that we're trying to post weekly or bi-weekly. But our main concern right now is getting our name out there, getting people involved, and finding the different ways that we can hear from the community what's on their mind, what are their thoughts. Any questions?
Maria?
Yes,
I do. Has the Main Street program either discussed or taken a position on the potential gas station complex that is looking at the old Cooper Harris car lot that's within your jurisdiction, I believe?
We have. We have discussed it. It's been discussed on committees. It's been discussed within the PBA. There's a lot of talk. I will say from the Main Street position, of course, you know, our goal is economic vitality. We want to bring in business. We want to support business. But part of our goal is also promoting our downtown vision, the vision that was adopted in 2014. And that particular use for that particular lot doesn't really align with the vision. We certainly welcome that company to Pittsboro and wish them the best. We just, if there was another location, we would prefer that. There are many uses for that area, and in the surveys that we conducted on the street fair, while there were certain businesses that people would like to see in downtown, which were mostly clothing and restaurants, there were also public uses and people were really looking for more parks, especially parks that were geared towards children. They were looking for a rec center. They were looking for a cultural arts, movie theater, community center. Those were the standouts for us that people were looking for in downtown Pittsboro. I hope that answers your question.
Thank you. I have a comment. I was approached by someone this week who was concerned about the mural that's Salon Blue on the side done by Clyde Jones. And they were saying, I have not really looked at that mural in a long time, but they suggested that would need some attention. And I didn't know if that was something that might fall under the Main Street program, but that does seem like the local treasure, and I don't know how you go about making sure that that's preserved. Mm-hmm. But Clyde Jones is such an icon in these parts of the East, and it's a nice thing to have in downtown Pittsburgh, so I want to throw that out. You all might want to put on your radar.
Yeah, certainly. And one of the things that we're hoping to do through the design committee, and we've talked with the Chatham Artists Guild about this, is working towards some sort of public art program or ordinance. And also, as I said, we're looking for places to identify public art opportunities, but also certainly preservation is part of what we do. So preserving what we already have would fall in with that. And I talked with a woman a couple of years ago that helped coordinate that. You're talking about the one that was done across from the Roadhouse, right?
It's right on the side of
near Postal.
Yeah, near Postal Fish Company.
Oh, down there. Okay.
Faded.
Well, thank you.
Yeah.
We'll have to take a look at that.
I don't know if Clyde would even be able to work on it anymore, but it seems to be restored.
I hear you. Thank you. Any other questions?
Maria.
Thank you. The designs are beautiful too, all the logos and different things.
Now we do have the text amendment for accessory dwelling units with Victoria. Thank you.
Thank you. We have zoning text amendment 2017-02, accessory dwelling units. Randy Voller and Leslie Landis have requested an amendment to the table of uses in the Pittsburgh zoning ordinance. Currently, accessory dwelling units are required to obtain a special use permit in the RA, RA2, RA5, R10, R12, R12M, and ONI zoning districts. The zoning ordinance defines an accessory dwelling unit as a dwelling unit that exists either as a part of a principal dwelling or as an accessory building, and is secondary and incidental to the use of the property as single-family residential. The applicants have requested a text amendment to allow accessory dwelling units to be permitted by right in zoning districts RA, RA2, RA5, R10, R12, R12M, R15, and ONI. The housing section, too far. The housing section in the Pittsburgh Future Land Use Plan specifically mentions accessory dwelling units, stating that the restrictions on accessory dwelling units in current ordinances may be relaxed to allow for a mix of housing choices within a neighborhood, thereby tying renters with a community rather than concentrating renters in large multifamily complexes. These accessory units have the added benefit of allowing elderly parents a way to maintain their quality of life and stay with their families longer. A public hearing was held on January 22nd. No citizens spoke. The planning board reviewed this request at their meeting on February 5th. The board found this text amendment to be consistent with our future land use plan and voted unanimously to recommend approval in a vote of 5-0.
Are there questions from the board or Victoria? We have two things to do here, to either approve or deny the consistency statement and the actual ordinance amending the zoning.
Yes, I have some questions about this. We may have already covered this, forgive me if we have, Victoria or Jeff. Potential negative repercussions from this. Can you speak about that? How those are anticipated and how you deal with them?
Well, I mean, I don't really see any negatives. The ordinance already takes care of the size requirements. It's not going to let you, it has to be, the accessory dwelling unit, if it's detached, has to be 50% of the principal dwelling unit. So that takes care of the size of the actual structure, and then the lot has to be, I believe,
1.5 times.
okay, yeah, 1.5 times larger than the minimum lot size of that district, of that zoning district. So the zoning ordinance still takes care of requirements. And I really only see it as a plus because we've had numerous citizens come in asking about it, and once they find out it's a special use, it becomes a real hassle for someone who wants their parents to stay with them.
Yeah. And forgive me for not catching this when I skimmed it, but are there stipulations as to the mode of construction, or could this be modular construction?
It would depend upon the zoning district. If the zoning district allowed for a modular home, as long as it met the requirements.
And there's variations?
Yeah. Modular, regular, single family, manufactured homes, there's different, all different types of single family residents.
Thank you.
I'll make a motion to approve the consistency statement.
Second.
Moved by Michael Fiocco, seconded by Bill Wilson Foley, to issue the consistency statement. Those in favor, please indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, motion carries unanimously. Is there a motion to amend the ordinance? So moved.
Second.
Moved by Pamela Baldwin, seconded by Bette Wilson Foley. Those in favor, please indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, motion carries unanimously. Thank you. Parks Plan. Paul Warren, our Parks Director. Paul, before you get started, I wanted to thank your steering committee and advisory board, and I don't know if there are any of those members here tonight, but obviously you all have done just an amazing amount of work, and I just wanted to thank you for everything that has gone into that.
We'll send that to them. They're an excellent group, and they serve the borough really well. And I look forward to hearing your feedback on this plan after you've had a chance to read it. This is really just the first 4 chapters, the first 2 phases. The existing conditions phase, which looks at our plans, policies, and that are pertinent to this plan and how they fit in. Also includes needs and priority sections, which looks at national trends, many of the multiple inputs that we use to identify these priorities. The most important one being, of course, the statistically valid survey that went out to 300 residents in the town. It's just huge. So, the next phase is where the rubber really hits the road. In some sense, this is background material. And the next phase is visioning. And that would kick off with a work session with the board. One, to check in, make sure that this is going, that you're in alignment with this plan as written so far. If there's corrections, if there's other things you want to see, that's the opportunity to say, this is good, but we want to go here. That gives you a chance to check in. And what we're proposing is to schedule that work session for either March 5th or 6th, provided that your schedules allow for such. I assume that you've had some discussion. What is the will of the board?
There's a planning board meeting on the 5th.
I don't think there is.
Is that good?
I think that was a
March
day
5th would be, that's Monday, Tuesday the 6th.
My apologies. There is a planning board on the 5th.
Yeah.
And we were talking about doing this in the evening?
Yes.
Okay. Well, I do it on the 6th.
I can too.
What time will we start?
Whenever you want.
I'd say 6.
It would be very long. I might be late at 6.
That'd be late.
You want to say 6:30 now? Would that give a little more ease? Just testimony to what a dull social life we all have that we can be that night.
Excellent.
Here.
And that work session would be followed the next day with focus groups on some particular topics. And you're welcome to attend those as well, but really we'll pull in people in the community that are really experts in those specific areas.
When will you be doing that? All during the day?
Yes, sir. And I'll, as we narrow that schedule down, once we lock these dates in, I can send that out.
That'd be great.
Yeah.
6 at 6:30. And then a visioning group will work on the 7th for engagement.
That's right. Okay, that's great. That's all I have. Thank you so much for scheduling that. And if you have comments, concerns, questions, feel free to pass them my way before that event, and we'll be sure to target the proceedings based on this.
I did not see our little tract of land on Rectory Street. Are you considering that a park?
Absolutely,
or open
absolutely.
space?
We're considering a park. It was an oversight on my part as well as the consultant's part. It was they're aware of it, I'm aware of it. It just didn't get into the iteration.
Thank you, Paul. We now have our special item, as Mayor Pro Tem Pamela Baldwin had requested, and so I think we need Fred Royal. Would you step up to the microphone, please?
Hi.
Hi. We are very aware that this is our last opportunity to have you on the hot seat. And so we did specially design tonight for stormwater, but before we get started on serious things, we felt that we wanted to celebrate the fact that you are taking several big jumps here, that you are returning to Wilmington to work with the Wilmington Metropolitan Planning Council, and we wish you the very best with respect to that. And we also understand that you have nuptials coming up in April. So
That's correct.
I
do.
There's
I got to practice.
And those are two wonderful events, and we wanted to celebrate that with a little card for John, and you can pop up and present that to Fred.
Thank you.
Excellent.
Thank you so much.
Do we need to roast?
Yeah.
We need to roast.
Are you guys going to play some slides now? Or? Thank you very much.
Well, we will be counting to the number of Carhartt pants and vests and jackets and all of that before you leave to make sure that you've turned in.
Everything will be washed
all
and
your
turned in. This is a special night for me. As a surprise that my mother's even in the audience tonight.
Tomorrow's her birthday. Any other items of roasting for Fred Royal?
We'll magnify
Well, then we have you up then for the stormwater additional elements.
Give just a brief introduction to Fred, and then we'll have Fred come up and ask him. Tonight we're having stormwater, as the mayor has mentioned that we just went through. Fred is leaving us, unfortunately. And Fred has been integral with the stormwater element, working with the applicant on drafting what is before you. And we thought tonight would be a good send-off for Fred to give his opinion on his efforts along with Chatham Park to draft the stormwater element and design manual. This has been going on since 2016, but we had the public hearing in March of last year. The Chatham Park Additional Elements Committee gave recommendations in February. The Plan Board met in May, introduced the responses and comments to the staff and board members. We received the elements on May 31st and June 28th. There was some changes that were made. Plan Board considered these elements again during the June 5th meeting. Tabled the recommendations to July 5th. Plan Board did recommend moving forward with this element at their at their meeting in July. At the June meeting and July 5th meeting, they voted to move forward with the revised element. There was discussion during the summer, June board meeting. There was a desire by the board to have a workshop with the applicant. The workshop was delayed because of scheduling conflicts, and we held the workshop in September. September workshop, there was thought that there needs to be a public workshop. Public workshop was held the following week in September here in this room. The applicant and staff were involved, and there were several members of the public here. And we have since had drafts back to staff since November. We have been reviewing those. We've been working with the applicant to go over the changes that are before you, and ready to offer up to you all the opportunity to ask questions of staff and the applicant. And Fred is here, and the applicant's here, and can answer any questions that you might have. We understand that we might not get through all of the questions tonight, but they're here as long as we need to be to answer the questions on the stormwater. And for that, I'll have Fred come up, and maybe Fred can give an introduction of his thoughts on the draft stormwater element that's before you.
Thank you again. Excuse me. I have some strong coffee from the Greek restaurant down here, so be careful if you drink it. I'm just going to give a very brief, more detailed history of how we got here from the town's perspective. And just stop me anytime, please, for questions. I would say over a year and a half ago, I started talking to the Chatham Park engineering firm, namely Withers and Ravenel, and several of their key engineers in the stormwater area. And one of my concerns was, how do we quantify these terms of critical environmental resources, and what does it mean to provide environmental excellence, because it's in the master plan, and we needed to come up with some kind of answer to that. So, as you guys know, my background is in stormwater management primarily. I've learned a lot about different things in the last 5 years, so thank you for letting me do that, transportation specifically. But what I'll say is that the stormwater performance standards that they have in the master plan are kind of standard performance criteria for most cities, with the caveat that they are continuing to voluntarily manage total nitrogen and total phosphorus. During the time from the master plan to today, the state legislators made mandatory nitrogen and phosphorus removal in Jordan Lake watershed illegal. So we have to honor that legality, and Chatham Park agreed to do it voluntarily, which I think is great. Nitrogen and phosphorus is the number one problem in Jordan Lake, and that's going to be a problem in Jordan Lake. And so the fact that Chatham Park is doing this is a plus. So it started with trying to figure out how to quantify critical environmental resources as it relates to stormwater. We all know that there's a lot of critical environmental issues out there. Carbon, noise, light, dust, natural resources, wildlife habitat. There's a lot of critical issues, but specifically for stormwater element, basically their engineering guy, engineer Hunter Freeman, whom you've all heard from, and I agreed to try to not look at all of the other areas, because this is specifically a stormwater element. And then we sat down and decided what are the critical environmental resources. Well, they're listed in the proposed element. And the one that, frankly, I insisted that they add to it, which is a little bit of a deviation from most stormwater ordinances, is tree canopy. Tree canopy is a planning tool. It's not a component of stormwater ordinances ordinarily. So that made it kind of challenging for us to figure out how do we bring tree canopy into a regulation that is all about runoff. I mean, it is true that trees play a huge role in mitigating runoff. I was just at a luncheon the other day in Raleigh with my good colleague, Dr. Bill Hunt, who is basically the North Carolina and now a global guru in stormwater best management practice research. And he and I have been talking for years. I've been doing a lot of research projects with him in the field. He builds them, or I design them, he builds them, he studies them, and then we decide was it a good idea or not. He's done this all over the state of North Carolina. He's taken his work to China, Australia, and everywhere. So he's top of the line. So I was talking to him at the luncheon after he spoke about ecosystem services, which I was surprised and impressed he even talked about it, because he's a stormwater guy. But he started telling people how stormwater management, stormwater management is directly tied to many other aspects of the environment that you can turn into what's called ecosystem services. So I told him what we're doing here with Pittsboro and how we're discussing this with Chatham Park, and he was very interested. And in fact, we had a workshop at NC State several months ago that he participated with his students, and we presented to them this challenge. And the students, this was a 5-hour workshop, and the students came up with their own ideas, and they were very good ideas, and they were very intrigued on how this works. Thank you. That tastes pretty good, too. So, tree canopy is now a component of stormwater element in Chatham Park. And so we moved forward, and we had to decide, how does that work? So I mentioned to Hunter Freeman the word non-structural SCM. I said, let's just look at it like it's another non-structural SCM, which means it's something that's not built. It's just a planning tool, or it's another mechanism to achieve your goal. So preserving tree canopies is a great example of non-structural stormwater management. Another non-structural stormwater management is signage. So you can list out all kinds of things that fall into that category. So we said we need to define what that means, which we did. The third piece was when the first draft came out, I was concerned that some of the things I've seen in my professional training weren't there. And one of them was steep slope protection. It wasn't there, and I suggested we add it in, we put points on it, and we make it another incentive to avoid steep slope development, and i.e. preserve steep slopes. We can all talk about what a steep slope is and debate and discuss it, or you could just look at different model ordinances like Chatham County's ordinance as an example. But I really wanted to see steep slopes in there. And after the public workshop, the public meeting, a lot was said about ephemeral stream buffers, so I gave a presentation about that. That is now in the element. Arguably, it doesn't have a whole lot of points associated with it, but it's in the element for discussion. And I was pleased to see that. So, moving on, the element document is language that doesn't have a lot of performance associated with it. It's language. It describes the intent and some definitions and what have you. So I personally didn't have a lot of comments about the element. And my memo was very brief. And what I was doing in the memo was just describing that I thought the element with a few minor adjustments, which I can't remember what they are right now, but they're very minor, or that it was otherwise, it met the intent in my mind. The issue I have was the design manual. The biggest issue I have with it is it has never been tested before, so we don't really know how it's going to behave in the field. We don't know if it's going to meet the intent of the scoring system. The argument that it took me months to get over was, which was mentioned in the Haw River Assembly's discussion and others, was the notion that you get credits for stuff that you already have to do anyway, like protecting a riparian buffer. And Hunter successfully convinced me, after a lot of discussion, that they should be in there because they're a real thing and they should be credited for protection. Now I said, well, everybody has to do that. And he said, well, that's why they calibrated the model to bring you up to a baseline that includes floodplains and riparian buffers. But you can't go above that, so you have to do even more. And that's how I was convinced personally that including buffers and floodplains for points and stream protection and stream impacts is valid as long as you're not getting everything that you need to meet environmental excellence or to meet protecting critical environmental resources. So, excuse me.
Fred, if I could just interrupt because I had a very similar issue. And my understanding of the scoring system is that it provides a mechanism by which to compare something exceptional relative to the baseline. And in the baseline are those items you just mentioned.
Right.
Therefore, they've got to be here, but you've got to do more.
Correct. And one of the things that made me agree with that notion is when we had a meeting with Chatham Park, as Jeff and I have been doing for quite some time, they showed us how many stream impacts they avoided with a road plan that originally had I think maybe 13 stream crossings, and maybe now it's half that or something. It's significantly less. And I said that's the thing that's a non-structural best management practice where you're avoiding impacts in the first place. And that was the essence of it. So fast forwarding. Now arguably they have Army Corps of Engineer issues if they impact too many more linear feet of stream. It's a problem for them, and so it serves them well to avoid stream impacts from a regulatory standpoint, just so you'll know. As an example, the new parkway getting built right now has 2 bridges going over streams because the impacts would have put them in a whole other level of permitting with the Army Corps. So they're bridging them, which I think is terrific. Bridging has a lot of benefits to wildlife, movement, floodplain, etc. So that's just another example. I'm just going to give you a couple of things I agree. I read the Haw River Assembly. I read all the other comments, and I just want to bring them out. Some of the notions that I think are true and valid. The question is, how do we get there? One is that Chatham Park should be able to take protected trees, and because of stormwater, because of open space, because of tree protection, and use that to their advantage. The old saying, 3 birds with 1 stone type of a thing. But it actually is an incentive for them to look at all 3 at once where possible. And that notion, I think, is valid because I like to call the best of the best forest, everybody talks about smart stuff like smartphones and smart speakers. Well, smart trees. Trees that do multiple, tree stands, I'm talking acres and acres of tree stands, that do multiple benefits to everybody at once. One of those is stormwater. But I'm not going to get into tree protection or open space because that's just not where we're at. So on the stormwater side, smart trees are the trees in the riparian buffers. They are the trees in the floodplain. They are the trees on the steep slopes. They are the trees that are in ephemeral channels. If you're talking about trees that are just up in a field somewhere with no water feature anywhere nearby versus trees that are associated with an ephemeral channel, for water quality, those are more important trees than the ones that are not in the ephemeral channel. That's just my stormwater hat on thinking about this. Because it's easy to get diverted to all trees everywhere. So I think if one of the things that design manual may not go into enough is prioritizing tree stands. Maybe the equation or the calculus for that could be modified a little bit. But my ultimate comment is that this is a new area for stormwater. If somebody wants to show me an ordinance where tree protection gives you the ability to build something and not do a structural stormwater device like a wetland or a wet pond, I've never seen this. So we're pushing forward here into new territory. So I would just advise we do it carefully and slowly and see how it goes. That's why I said the word conditional approval on the design manual, because I think it needs to be exercised and maybe modified before it's rolled out for exercise. So the other comment that was made was the fact that runoff amounts are going up. So I went to this Chatham Conservation Partnership meeting the other week, or last week, and there was a brilliant speaker. Who was he with? Okay. He was a USGS meteorologist or something along those lines. And he gave a great presentation on rainfall changes over the last decade. And he showed us that, we all know this, rainfall intensity is going up. You don't have to believe anything about climate change to recognize that. And so he showed the data. He showed how it's going to go up in certain parts of the country, and other parts of the country are going to go more into drought. This area, it's kind of on the border. It could go way more to the left or way more to the right. So we're subject to drought as equal as we're subject to torrential rainfall events. And we're talking about 6 inches in 4 hours, that kind of rain, just massive amounts of rain. So one of the comments in the Haw River Assembly is that the Chatham Park performance standards don't meet that kind of intensity. It meets the 2 year, the 1 year, the 2 year, the 5 year, and the 10 year storm event. That's a pre-development discharge compared to a post-development discharge. So it's a rate differential, from 30 CFS to 100 CFS for those different storm events. That's what they're doing up to the 10-year storm. Does that address these 6 inches in 4 hour rainfall? It does not. It just doesn't. However, that doesn't mean you have to build the largest ponds and the largest containment systems known to man. It just means you have to figure out a way to deal with it. And one of them is this non-structural stormwater approach. Another is you can do culvert crossings of the critical flooding areas that are larger. You can do things that are not stormwater related from a runoff standpoint because of new development, but that's just hydraulics of culverts that go underneath roads. So I would recommend look at where are the critical areas that would flood, that will flood, and what can the development before it's built do to mitigate that based on the known higher intensity flooding that's coming, that we know it's coming, it's already here.
Right.
So, yes?
On those increased events that you're talking about, is there a movement in the scientific field to redefine what the 10-year storm is? So it's
I asked him that. I said, are you familiar with Technical Paper 40 that was written in the 60s, I think? He wasn't familiar with it, and I said, well, I'm a civil engineer, and that's our water Bible, and that's what we use. It defines, the National Weather Service does keep up Raleigh's frequency curves and everything, but it doesn't take into consideration these projections and this is real data. So that's something that the National Weather Service needs to deal with. But at the local level, I don't know that there's any problem with using another intensity, like it's called an intensity duration frequency curve for local stormwater ordinances. I don't think there's a legal hurdle on that one. That's just a technical requirement for flooding.
So we're using the 10-year storm for sizing pipes and that kind
Right.
of thing. Perhaps you just go to the 25-year storm.
Yeah, or you look at the intensity, and you have to back into the flow using the intensity of the rainfall. There's an equation you use to generate the runoff based on a 6-hour storm, a 5-minute storm. All storms technically have these 5-minute storms, 30-minute storms, 6-hour storm, 12 hours. So you can look at that and generate runoff requirements based on more intensity, higher intensity. The 10-year, 24-hour storm, it's a very beautiful shaped curve, X, Y, and over 24 hours. That's not how it rains anymore. Now it rains like this, and so it doesn't work in reality. But that's how engineers have been doing it for decades.
Is it possible for a non-structural BMP to perform all of the demands that we have placed, or that is in the master plan for Chatham Park, such as the peak runoff for the 1, 2, 5, and 10?
You could put in, you could do land use so that you're doing your best to reduce runoff based on the land use that you put down on the ground. Whether it be a grassy field, a big infiltration basin under a baseball field, or a forest. You can do things that are non-structural like that lowers that runoff rate, and it's all based on calculations from there. So,
I just know that when we change the ground cover in any way, shape, or form, you can do these non-structural things like preserving area, minimizing impervious surfaces. But at the end of the day, we still change the hydrograph, and we have said that the post-development runoff will not exceed the pre-development peak condition.
For the 10-year storm.
1, 2, 5.
Yeah.
Right?
Yep.
And so we know non-structural has enormous value, but I think at the end of the day, you probably still need structural.
Yes,
pieces.
absolutely. Yeah, that was one of the big conversations that Hunter and I had was no matter what you do, you still have to manage your difference in your peak discharge for those storm events. So that requires structural BMP. And so Chatham Park is and will do structural BMPs for that purpose. But they could build basically less of them if they develop their different sites, preserving as much, the A's and the B soils, the soils that really infiltrate. We have B's and C's really. And some of the forests that will actually do the job. The other thing Bill Hunt said in his talk was it was like a little quiz. He goes, so if you have a Piedmont forest and it rains 100 inches in 24 hours, he just came with them. How many inches will flow out of that forest? It's one of these. Everybody's kind of looking around like, And well, the answer is it retains about 90 to 95% of the water in the forest. And he uses an example of abstraction, which is a technical term, that vegetation. He says he takes his kids into the woods right before it rains, and they all stand under a different tree. And I'm like, what about the lightning? And he's like, you got to make sure there's no... And they all play this game of who gets wet first, because it takes many minutes sometimes before you even feel one raindrop, because the trees just collect the rain. And that was his example of how this works. So that's existing forests are a very good non-structural stormwater management device. And so that's something Chatham Park, I think they are looking at that. They're doing a lot of that, and maybe there's more. But my comment was road test the design manual and see if it's making the runoff characteristics and the intent of the element, is it there or not? I don't think anyone can really say affirmatively right now if it'll, as is, if it will actually meet everybody's intentions. There's other things about administratives. There's a huge administrative burden that's going to be placed on Chatham Park that needs to be spelled out clearly with the stormwater mapping, the data transfer. Jeff and I have talked about this with other data transfers over from land use to tree protection and other things, parks, open space. But it all needs to be in an easy to manage documentation for the town, so that the town's not overwhelmed every time a development comes in, trying to figure out, does this meet the element or not? And it needs to be very clear and specific. And that was mentioned in another set of comments. It needs to be just a little more fleshed out. And Hunter and I did talk about that, and he said, well, they haven't got it fully developed, that administrative piece yet. It's just they're not there yet. But the thinking is there. We're talking about GIS database type, high technology, data transfer, record keeping, and things like that. So the issue boils down to you don't want to flood your neighbor. You don't want to create a pollution problem. And the stormwater element does not associate itself, or it's not directly associated with your sedimentation and erosion control, which is another issue, another problem, another challenge, but it's there, which is why the town has agreed to work with Chatham County to get the erosion control piece taken care of. They just had an issue come up yesterday, and they're working on it. The system is working well. Chatham Park self-reported. They came to the county and the Army Corps. Everybody's having a meeting Thursday. And I talked to the county about it this morning, and she said everything is going well. And now we're going to sit down and go to the field and find out what happened and address it. I was really glad to hear that, because the fact that everyone's on it early. The presentation you had before of 4 years of sedimentation, that is not associated with this one event. There's been other events, but this one was self-reported by Chatham Park, and I'm really glad that happened. So I think that they're on the right track. It's just a matter of making everything kind of smooth out. So that's all I have in a nutshell. The one other thing is they did remove a lot of language of intent in the stormwater exceptional design evaluation. I thought it was kind of good to have some of that language in there to describe to people who don't know, who come into this cold and don't know what it is we're doing. Some of the language that was in there in the first round was deleted, or all of it. Some of it was modified, but a lot of it's gone, and it seems like some of that should come back to describe what's going on. So that's about all I have in brief. So if there's any other questions, I'd be happy to try to answer them.
Yeah, if I might speak to that last point of yours. I worked in the legislature for a while, and I think there's a lot of value in having legislative intent anytime you're drafting a piece of ordinance or legislation in the traditional sense of the word. And for many years, North Carolina didn't have that. And I agree with you. I think a lot of that language needs to come back because to delete it and to do otherwise, and maybe Mr. Eagle has a reason that he doesn't think it needs to be in there. But from my standpoint, I want future interpreters of this document to understand that we had the following intent, and that intent needs to be carried out. And so I'm with you on wanting some of that language reinserted.
I agree. I think that's like a mission statement is what we strive for. And I think it's nice to see that in there. I was disappointed to see that taken out as well.
So I don't know if Mr. Eagle or someone wants to answer that, but maybe there's some of that language that could come back that doesn't have some other critical reason.
Ken Eagle, 2235 Gateway Access Point, Raleigh, attorney for Chatham Park. Madam Mayor, part of the reason that language was deleted, I think, was a misunderstanding. I thought that Mr. Warren wanted a lot of that language out because it's non-regulatory, really. It's a lot of language that doesn't go to any specific regulations. If we know what the board prefers to have in there, I mean, we don't mind putting some of that language back in there. But that's the reason it came out, was to just kind of simplify things and not have a lot of language that really wasn't going to regulations per se.
Well, it wasn't, but I mean, it may not be regulatory, but it was certainly visionary.
No, I understand. I mean, and if you let us know what it is, I mean, you know, we're happy to put some of that back in.
I had a similar finding relative to the design manual. And in my mind, the design manual, one of the most important things, or the thing that it's doing, is trying to make design meet standards. And it doesn't say that that's one of its objectives. So I thought that should definitely be in there. It's there to help design meet the goals and the standards of the master plan and the additional element.
That's certainly something we'd be happy to add.
And I think that goes to the whole notion that Fred just mentioned about test driving this thing. And that if it's not fulfilling that mission, then it needs to get modified. Because I think the master plan is pretty clear on what the standards are. I think Fred did a great job of that very early on, saying we've got to control flooding, we've got to control peak runoff, we've got to control the nutrients and water quality. And so those standards are in there. And yes, I think it goes to the integrity of the developer, who, when the legislature said, no, you don't have to do this, they said, well, we've committed, we're doing it. And that specifically is enough to in the phosphorus. So I certainly appreciate you guys sticking by that.
And now that we have talked about that, all of this, as frustrating as it has been to work on it through the months and years, that we have a review process, that we're at some point going to sit down and review it at the behest of the board or annually or however we decide to do it. I feel a whole lot more comfortable about Fred's test driving concept, is that we'll have an opportunity to sit down and say, has this really worked? And I feel much more comfortable about doing it rather than to think it was set in concrete.
Well, I certainly understand. We have anticipated, I think, all along since we got into this discussion of the point system and establishing these critical environmental resources and the categories and assigning, it's changed during the process, number one. And number two, we fully anticipated that it would change as time goes on, just as other elements will change. We're discovering that already that there may be, that there are some things probably in the sign element that may need to be changed to avoid some issues down the road. just as the board took action tonight to change your zoning ordinance to allow that housing that you previously only allowed by special use permit. Sometimes, things happen over time, and that's why we have this dialogue, and that's why we understand that things will do that over time, and we'll need to do that. Try as we might, and we have tried, believe me, and we have brought in some of the better consultants you can find around here to advise us on these elements. You can't think of everything. You can't cover every possible situation. If you could, we wouldn't have to have the legislature and the United States Congress meet all the time. I mean, you can't possibly deal with it at one time. So we fully expect that to occur, and we have no issue with test driving the stormwater design manual. We think that's a pretty good idea, and so we'll all understand how it works, and if we need to, we test drive it, and the test drive gets off track a little bit, then we can make those adjustments early on in the process before it gets too far down the road. So
I do have a question about a lot of the language in this implies that Chatham Park can make revisions, but it doesn't say the town can make revisions. And that to me seems it should be able to go both ways. There's quite a bit of different places.
Well, I think, Commissioner Foley, that the language says we can propose revisions, but the town stormwater administrator has to approve them, or some other person designated by the board. So we can't just unilaterally make these revisions, and we would hope that the town wouldn't do that to us, unilaterally make changes after this stormwater element is approved. But we certainly we're not.
The town could approach you all with revisions, but it doesn't say that in the document. It seems like to be on the safe side that it should say that either party could bring that to the attention of the other.
And that's fine. We don't have an issue with that.
As
long as we all have to agree on it.
It seems like there might be something that the board should have a say in, and I don't know specifics, but it seems like if something has a large impact, there might be things that the board could actually vote on. What are you all thoughts about? I don't have specific things in mind, but it's just something to think about. There might be things that will have lasting impact.
Well, I think, these documents are akin to the zoning ordinance that we have. We put that in place, and we say, these are the rules. We have Jeff and Victoria administer the rules. We have Fred administer the rules. I think, obviously, if we need to change the rules, it will come back to the board. But if you are very vested to write the coherent set of documents that allows the administration of the town to occur without the vote. But definitely, I think changes would come to the board. I think part of the way this is set up is not ordinance, so that you can be more flexible with changes to it, so that it doesn't have to come all the way to the board, that the engineers can get together and say, it's not meeting this goal, this is what we want to do, this is how we want to change it.
I think we have to read it almost like a legal document. If it's not in here, then it might not happen. I just think we need to, if that's what we envision, then there should be language that reflects that.
Agreed.
Because we're talking about 20 or 30 years from now, things might come up, and none of us will be sitting here. We just need to make sure that just because we talk about it, it needs to be in here.
I believe we do have that in our provisions, don't we? It's
right.
Annual review, revision, revise.
Our elements to get together periodically. I think we said minimum once a year, unless we decide not to do it in a year. But that's everything. It goes for everything.
Might I make a suggestion on that particular thing? This stormwater manual is in the nature of a design standards manual that towns adopt for streets, for sewer, for things like that. And those things are typically, to borrow my friend Chuck Smith's favorite word, they're typically administered by town staff. And some of the standards change over time. For example, if the state of North Carolina which we've incorporated the stormwater requirements of the state into the design manual. If the state came up with another type of stormwater control measure that the state thought was appropriate, then that would be the kind of thing that, you know, a design manual would change to add that into the design manual. My suggestion, and perhaps Fred would agree with this, would be that those types of things that, you know, your town engineer or stormwater administrator would take care of. If we're going to change the point system, if we're going to add points for something or reduce points for something, then that seems to me more like a board sort of issue than technical things that, you know, you're paying your staff to address.
And that brings me to another question, talking about the point system. So the points are based on what the minimum standard is at the time, whether it's state, town, county. But as these things change, do the points stay permanent that are assigned at that time? Or as these standards change, does it also impact the score? You know what I mean?
Well, sort of. I think that's what I'm talking about. If we're going to change the points, then that would be something that would come before the board.
I'm not talking about specifically the number, the point assignment of specific things. I just mean if you're basing this whole scoring system on what the minimum standards are, and then those standards change either on the county, town, or state level, does that also change the score, the total score? You know what I'm saying? I'm not talking about the specific things like the points that you get for doing certain things. I'm talking about if the baseline changes the standards that you're basing the 100% on, if those kinds of things change.
I'm going to ask Fred if he'll come up and address that, because he's much better suited to address that than I am, possibly.
So the current point system brings you up to about 90 points, right? And that current point system is based on today's regulations, state, local, county. So if those change, then yes, the baseline needs to be looked at. It might go up or down, depending on the rule. You know.
That could get crazy.
It could, but yeah, the only thing that's going to change, in my guess, was nitrogen and phosphorus. One day will come back. Okay, so the baseline could change at that point.
Things could start to change quickly if we are starting to see the impact of climate change. There may be more changes in the future. I just wondered, so those numbers are kind of floating.
Right. Well, that's why the whole notion of the design manual being reviewed every year or something like that is good, to look at baseline. You know, what points did Chatham Park pick to get that extra 30 points? How did they go about doing that? Was that done in the planning stage way in advance, or did they just grab it and run? And those kind of things, I think, are going to be interesting to look at.
Business numbers can change retroactively if the ordinances change.
So that was one of the questions I had looking at the point system, was what was the baseline? And I did not see 90 points stated or referenced anywhere. I mean, obviously, the theory is, or the philosophy is, this is exceptional because it exceeds this base, but it did not define the base.
By the way, before Robbie addresses that, Hunter is on a flight to Connecticut to visit his mother, so he's not available tonight. We have Alessa Braswell, who's here with Withers and Ravenel, and has worked very closely with Hunter over the last couple of years with this stormwater element and with developing the point system. And of course, Robbie Odom's here. You all know Robbie and from Withers and Ravenel as well. So they're here to help kind of answer those types of technical questions that you don't want me to answer.
That's a Robbie Odom, Withers Ravenel. That's a good question. And when Hunter first proposed this, I was looking at this and I kind of had the same question. And one thing, the way I looked at it is, okay, do we just want to look at just giving additional points for what's above and beyond the minimum, as everybody keeps saying? If you did that, then it might be 30 points. So when we looked at this, there's reasons why I can get into it and try to explain it, but if you go through a standard development, you know, and meet the requirements, the standards for the Chatham County or town of Pittsburgh, or even the state, you're looking at about 90 points. And Alessa, we've done several case studies on that. Fred is aware of that, and we've looked at that. So that gets you to the 90 points. But there's no way to get to 120 unless you do this exceptional measures, whether it's preservation or whether it's additional measures during construction or during design. So the additional is the exemplary is going from 90 to 120 or all the way up to 130 depending on where you're at within Chatham Park. And so you're looking at roughly approximately 90 points. I mean, every project's going to be a little bit different, I mean, depending on the site. So it's a site by site or a watershed by watershed basis. So where we've got the 90 points, then you can go to, if you look into it and say, okay, well, there's already commitments in the master plan, that's the approved master plan, with the additional stream buffers and with the additional attenuation with the 2, 5, and 10 storms. Well, that would get you to roughly like 100 points. So that still doesn't get you to the 120. I mean, so that's just approximate numbers when you look at it that way. So a development coming in, the town right now, you're looking at roughly 90 points. The Chatham Park project will be around 100 points. Well, we took this one step farther after meeting with Fred and Jeff and then saying, look, we need more here. So that's where you have to do more with what we've got in this design manual element to get to the 120 or 125 or even 130 points.
Okay, I have another question about the scoring. So if you have, this is just an example, if you have a steep slope that has trees on it and it has a stream going through it, does that one piece get the score points for all those things, or does it just get points for one piece of that?
No, you can get points in different categories.
On one piece?
Well, depending. I mean, yeah, that's right. If it meets certain ones, then yes, you could get points on top of that. And the scoring system is calibrated as such as that.
Okay, so you might just have, so let's say they needed to get an extra 40 points. It could all happen at one.
Well, yeah, but it's the way it works. I mean, you might get 6 points or something like that. And you'd have to go through and look at the points. So you might get 4 points there, 6 points there, things like that. It's not, you're going to get some points in there, but it's just not like you can get all 40 right with that example.
Is it Alyssa? Is that correct?
Alyssa, yes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You look like you want to speak to that issue.
Yeah, I was just going to add that Fred had discussed earlier about tree canopy, and part of the reason we've discussed this issue of double dipping, and really there is, as he mentioned earlier, the tree that is on the steep slope that is right next to the stream buffer, that is a more valuable tree. And protecting that tree is, doing that is one of the reasons why you can get points in multiple categories for that more valuable tree.
And again, it's not to say that tree is necessarily more valuable than another tree of the same type, but it's more valuable in the context of the stormwater element based on where it might be located and the reason for trying to preserve it and giving an incentive to do that.
I guess I'm still bothered by the point system, starting at the point at which ordinary development is. Yeah, I mean, first of all, the point system seems to be confusing, but the other part of it is that it almost seems like a purposeful way not to end up with a negative. In other words, if you started at 1 with the exemplary things that have been built into the scoring system here, then all you'd have to do is get to 30 or 40 or whatever it is. But because of the fact that you've got things that are required anyway as part of the 90 points, I still haven't seen the light on that. And
well, we could have said, you do all the things that the state and the town requires. that brings you to 0.
Yeah.
And then you start adding points for that. Our 0 is 90. I don't know a better way to say it.
You're talking about that could change with the...
It could change if it was 0. I mean...
No, not if you're starting off with the very basics, that there are no points.
I understand, but we could have said that's 0, whatever the basics are. We just, based on the point system that Hunter and Fred worked on, we've come to the realization that if you do that, if you do the state and local requirements, you'll be at around 90. That would be what a development outside of Chatham Park.
I thought you were saying that if the standards change, does that mean you're going to go back and have to look at everything that's already been done and reallocate how many points that you're supposed to get?
Well, no, not if it's already developed.
Okay, but that's not what they were saying earlier.
Can I just ask one question about the point relevant to what you're talking about?
Yes.
Because I don't know the answer to this. Is it possible to gain points above, let's just call it that 90, okay? Could you gain points above the 90 that would make up for actually doing less than
That's what you're going to have to put on
than what's
If you
required?
have an area that has more streams and more buffers, would you go over that 90?
Can you ask it one more time, and I'll try to answer it?
Well, there's two different, there's a question I was asking, and then she got some different questions.
Can you trade off points of things that are considered the minimum standard?
So if you're meeting 80 points, like your minimum is 90, and if you're
hitting 80.
if you're hitting 80, but you're trading off and you're saving open space and it's still in that sub-watershed because all the points are averaged. I like the idea of it being set at 0 because then you know it's
You have to do the minimum. It almost sounds like you don't.
have to do the minimum before you get extra
The way it's written.
We're looking at this on a sub-watershed level. And if you have, let's say you have 10 lots that are going to be developed in a particular sub-watershed, if, when all said and done, that entire watershed under our system, and let's assume it's not close to the Haw River, which requires a higher point total. But let's assume that we have to have 120 points for that watershed. If one of those 10 lots happens to come in at 87 points, that's going to have to be made up on the other 9 lots somewhere in order to maintain 120 for the entire watershed. So you don't...
So to say there's an area that was, that's really appealing for you to develop, you might want more density, you could theoretically forego reaching a certain, the 130 points or whatever, or 120 points as you were saying, and then use it somewhere else that's less desirable for you to develop. I mean, that's
all based on the sub-watershed. If it's within the sub-watershed, you might have a lot that doesn't, that lowers the average for the sub-watershed, in which case you have to make up for it on the other lots. You could, you could get to where you would just have to not develop one of those lots conceivably. We would certainly not want to get to that point.
Well, and I think that what's being described is a very well-known concept of clustering. You really focus development in an area to preserve other areas. So you might score small here, but the preservation of all this other brings the entire watershed into
But what happens, let's say we know that the riverfront property is going to be more valuable. So what's to stop them from wanting to develop that more intensely and then preserving something else that's less valuable to us for drinking water, but it's, for real estate purposes, it's more desirable. So is there any protection so that some of the most valuable watersheds aren't developed because they're close to, say, Haw River, and then the development is used elsewhere?
Fred's going to give you the engineering answer.
So the engineering answer is you get less points if you do it that way. The whole point of this is to incentivize good behavior.
Sure.
So if you develop on a steep slope, you're gonna ding yourself in points big time. Then you got to make up for it even more somewhere else that's in the design manual that gives you points, so you're back up to 120. So The intent is to disincentivize developing on critical environmental resources and incentivizing development on all the other areas that are not considered critical
There
environmental
might be
resources.
times when it's worth it because of the increase in value of that land, that it might be worth it for them to do that. So I'm exploring worst case scenarios because it's a concern I have that land, could be the land we most want to protect, but also happens to be the land that people would most want to build a house on. So I'm just want to make sure that this land fully protects those very precious areas.
And you're bringing up a good point that each sub-watershed has its own characteristics. And so the test driving part, I think, is even more critical to look at, a sub-watershed in an area that's got a lot more critical environmental resources than one over here that doesn't have so many, or it's more evenly balanced. So, but you're raising a really good point. How does that incentivize/disincentivize developing where critical natural resources currently exist?
It's also, like I say, the most popular real estate would be right on those rivers and streams.
Well, let me respond to that.
Okay.
The master plan sets out what the uses are in the 27 different sections that are shown on the master plan. And the ones out there in the area you're talking about are residential uses. Okay. So we also have to come in, and we've actually submitted, we haven't gotten to that point yet, and we'll be revising it and submitting it again, but we have to have small area plan. And that has to go before this board. And it's going to further refine what those uses are in the areas covered by that small area plan. So, we have another opportunity to look at that, and the board can weigh in on that as well. And then we have to come back, taking it down one more step with a subdivision plan or a site plan, whatever the case may be. Residential would be a subdivision plan in all likelihood. It could be a site plan if it were townhomes, but for single-family residential, it would be a subdivision plan.
There's another aspect to not only the type of uses, but the density of those uses is established as well. And in the area closest to the hall, those densities are graduated so that they're minimized closer to the river, and they gradually grow stronger or more numerous as you move away from the river.
So
And
the
that's
buffer is only,
international.
300 feet as opposed to what the original plan was to be 2,000 feet, and our land use plan is 300 feet below the state.
That's what it is in the master plan.
I know, that I did both.
The board approved that master plan and found it to be consistent with the land use plan in order to approve it as a zoning for the town of
That's why I
Pittsburgh.
didn't vote for it, because the land use plan said
And of
2,000.
course, that's been vetted to the North Carolina Court of Appeals.
Oh, I know.
And
I
upheld.
just have to every now and then remind you, I just express my frustration over
And I have to remind you that it went all the way through that. So.
So I've got a couple of technical questions that I think probably have been asked, but maybe quite differently, so I'll try it my way. The question is, can an individual site meet the minimum master plan standards and score below minimum watershed score?
Yeah.
I'll make sure I understand. So, individual site meets the master plan requirements.
1, 2, 5, 10 nutrients.
Yep.
1 inch.
And score below 90 or score below the minimum 120?
Below the minimum watershed score, because I think there are different.
Yeah, so which would be the, whatever the one.
Yeah.
Oh, he's asking, this is more like your, what we're talking about, so.
You go ahead.
So, yes, you can have an individual site that comes in, say you have a 100-acre sub-watershed. You have a 5-acre office building comes in there. So if you look at that individual site plan, then yes, it may score 90 or 95. Or 115 or 120 by itself. But there's that flexibility. But what you have to do, again, you're looking at an individual site plan that's 5 acres, and that project site manager may not have any riparian buffers on it, but that watershed may have 20 acres of riparian buffers. So yes, they could score less than the watershed, but that's the reason that we, it's built in flexibility, because there's other areas that we know that, with riparian buffers that you want to preserve, and to get it up to the whole watershed gets to the 120. So.
They would allow building in the riparian buffer?
No.
So I didn't understand what you were saying.
Another concern I have is that language says that we will monitor this once a year.
I'm sorry.
Another concern I have is that the stormwater elements will be measured once a year, be checked once a year. But I'm concerned, it seems like the first year that these things are put into place, it should be checked after like 6 months, just that first year, as opposed to a year, to make sure it's working. Because like we all know, this is experimental. We don't know for sure it's going to work. And so I would just propose that it be checked after 6 months the first year, and then after that, every year. So look at the board think about that.
On the trial period.
I'm not sure it's working after it's just recently been.
I will be in support of that. And then, I was thinking what you were talking about, where you won't mind taking a ding, as you called it, and plan to have something different in place that's optimum, and just concede that you don't mind taking a ding, and build that anyway. So how do you, and even though you said that's in the master plan, but how would that stop you from, I'm going to build it anyway, basically.
Yeah, because I'm just worth the money.
Because I'm going to make more money there, I'm going to build it there anyway, and take the ding. How do we avoid something like that?
That's a question for Fred.
I'm not sure what you mean by taking the ding. If we built something that wasn't allowed, we'd never get a certificate of occupancy.
Not necessarily allowed, but it would be allowed. Okay, what Beth was talking about, there were areas which you might prefer to build. Optimum area, I guess that's how I put it. But the other areas, you would get more points, but you would allow yourself to not have those points minus to go on and build in that particular area.
Well, again,
You know what I mean?
I think so. We're looking at it on a sub-watershed basis. And you have to maintain that requirement for the entire sub-watershed. It could be, again, that one lot in that sub-watershed may be less than 120. 5 other lots may be 125. 5 lots that might be along a riparian buffer, might make up for that one lot that's sitting out away from everything that you end up not making the 120 on. So that's yes, that could happen, but in the area that Commissioner Foley was talking about, that's not an intense development area in Chatham Park. You get
important, so I just really want you to be exceptional in those areas because it's the most important to the watershed.
We understand.
Yes.
You had another. I think you said you had 2. You brought one of them up. You said you had 2.
Well, let me ask this one.
Maybe you have 3.
Yeah. Well, I've had many others. So I think another way to phrase this question about the ding is, can an individual site meet all of the master plan standards and score below 90?
Unless I can address that.
In the case studies that we've done, if you meet all the minimum master plan standards, you're looking at a score of about 100, and again, that is an exceedance of what it would be if you only adhere to the town of Pittsboro. So you still do have to do additional elements or additional uplift strategies throughout the watershed to be able to meet that 120 score.
So the standards might change, so it may not always be 90, it might be a different number years from now. So standards change, they don't, they do, every 20, 30 years.
Can I ask a question about the word within? Can points be traded within that sub-watershed? They just can't be, I know they can't be traded between watersheds.
I think traded is not the word that really applies. It's, we're looking at a score when all is said and done within a sub-watershed of the minimum required score, either 120 or 125 or 130, depending on where it is. And so again, it's not that a site is trading points with another. It's just that if that first lot to develop scored 115 points, then that deficit, and at that point in time, that would be the only score you'd be looking at, because the rest of it, actually the score would be way higher at that point, because the other portion of the watershed would not be developed. But as you go through the watershed, if your average score for those lots that are developed, if you're starting, and plus what's left in the watershed, if you're starting to get below 120, then you've got to make that up with what's left. If you got to the last lot and if you develop the last lot, you would end up, the best you could do would be 118. Well, you might not be able to develop that last lot because you've got to meet the minimum score on the entire watershed.
Can I just make it quick? So these are great questions, but I also think that what we're not thinking about is what happens before the first development plan comes before you. Well, a lot happens in the planning department and with meetings with Chatham Park. And I think, based on my experience so far with Chatham Park, is we talk to them extensively about the detail of their proposal. And so when we start bringing in stormwater points, I feel pretty certain that Jeff and company will grill them vigorously about how this is going to work and what else can you do to avoid impacts. I mean, that's just my gut feeling. But I think that they're not going to just come in with a development plan and say, well, we're at 110 and we don't know how we're going to make it to 120. I think they're going to be a little more strategic than that, you would think. But I guess I just want to raise the point that Jeff and Victoria look at this way in advance, and myself, before it ever gets to be XYZ construction drawings. So I'm just wondering.
I just think it's important to make sure everything's clear in the wording of this, because 20 years from now, there'll be totally different people doing this. We just have to make sure there's no question that it's clear.
Right.
And I don't
be
want
clear on it.
And I don't want it to be so burdensome that you all, staff, have a hard time grasping it and dealing with it. I mean, it
Maybe
sounds...
because we've been working on it for a couple of years.
Yeah, but what happens if you're gone and somebody that comes along that hasn't been working on it, is it going to be clear to them?
Well, they would be, hopefully you would all hire professionals who would be able to administer ordinances and be able to read the document.
But that's the point. It needs to be really clear. It needs to be very clear.
I guess one of the scary things to me is that on page 3 it talks about that if it gets to a certain point, then there might need to be a mitigation plan. I don't ever want to be there. I don't think we should work our way within a sub-watershed to a point where we even are talking about that. Because if this is exceptional, and I know that there are days that you just wish you'd never heard or used that word, but if it's exceptional, then it darn well better not need mitigation.
And I want to get to some of the keep coming up with interesting ideas, but I'll diverge from where I want to go for a moment. But we're not the only ones who control what happens in that sub-watershed. And I can see a sub-watershed changing character from a hurricane or a forest fire. I mean, I think it would score completely differently if all the trees were burned down. Am I correct? So, we don't only control when mitigation is required. But to some of the other points about how do we administer this thing,
Fred, in your memo, you mentioned this watershed map being updated quarterly. And it seems to me it needs to be updated with every single submittal, every single site plan, every single subdivision to say, here's how this one scores in the watershed. So I think that's a regular ongoing thing. And then I start to think about, well, when do you count a project? If it's permitted, if it's approved, it's not on the ground yet, but it should probably count as being on the ground in the scoring regime. So that's, yeah, because it'll get built 3 years from now. And then going back to the idea of when is it deemed approved on the ground, tested, not tested, approvable. I think on page 5 in the exceptional design evaluation says that this will be done at construction drawing. And it seems to me we need to do it at site plan subdivision approval so that it does document zoning compliance. The details of how the pond gets built, all that stuff, that's construction drawing. But the idea that the pond is generally in this area and it's about this big and it has this impact to the site and scores this many points therefore, that's where I think the documentation should occur at the site plan level before it goes to construction drawings.
Is the flocculant that is mentioned on page 12 the same flocculant that's used in water treatment plants? This is in the design evaluation.
I have an answer for Fred. Fred's about it.
Yeah, the acronym is PAM. That flocculant is the same thing for stormwater only, not. Did you ask compared to a wastewater treatment plant flocculant? No. It doesn't behave like a clear well in a wastewater treatment plant.
And we're certain that it wouldn't have any kind of either environmental or health effect as a result of being put in a stream than it would in. What guarantees do we know about that chemical? Because it is a chemical, correct?
Yeah, it's
polychromate.
Yeah, the state approves it, and I'm sure it's not toxic, but I can look that up for you and send you the details about the chemical. I've seen it applied in different test cases in the last 25 years, and I've seen some cases where it did remove turbidity or reduce turbidity. In some cases, it did not reduce turbidity because it has everything to do with the flow and the way it's set up in the device, either a pipe or a channel or a weir. So PAM is not in my view, a tried and true method, but it does work under the right conditions. Is the best way I can put that in. I'm certain it's non-toxic because the state allows it. I know. It's been in the design manual for years. Let me put it that way. But I will talk to the state head stormwater person, and I'll get the information straight from her, just so we'll have it.
All right, since I'm totally confused and lost, I got one question maybe for Fred, and Ken did mention this, that you guys wrote this ordinance with the state regulations informed in that. do we have all the state regulations, or do we have the good, the bad, the ugly, or where do we stand with that? I mean, I'm just a little curious as, are we getting everything from the state, or?
Yes, we have all the state. Chatham Park has all the minimum state plus town of Pittsburgh on top of that.
Okay.
The state and Chatham County on top of that for erosion control. The state's Jordan Lake rules are, we're not a phase 2 community. We're less than 10,000 population, so we're off kind of in the, what was called the donut hole, I think they called it. And we counted on the Jordan Lake rules because that was our rule, other than the water supply watershed rules, which is very old. So we are counting on the legacy of the Jordan Lake rules right now, plus additional rules that the town put on Chatham Park in the master plan. There's additional rules in there that the state doesn't require.
One other question. You mentioned in your last few weeks of or months on tree coverage, how it was working in the watershed. Should we allow more points for tree coverage area?
More than what's shown?
Yes, maybe it would maybe give an incentive for more tree coverage.
That is subject to conversation. Is the Chatham Park proposed all the points. Steep slopes, tree coverage, buffers, they proposed all the points based on the priority. So streams is higher than trees. But certainly trees could be higher if that's what you wanted, or you could propose that. They would have to calibrate their model again to hit the 120 and the 130, which goes back to your question of if things change, what do? We have to go back and recalibrate the model. It's not an impossibility, but it's just something that would have to be done.
Does that say that you're generally in agreement with the numbers that they have proposed?
Personally?
Yeah. No, professionally.
Professionally, thank you. I was getting ready to say my professional opinion is they meet the priority sequence. Okay? Trees for stormwater quality are not as more important as not impacting a perennial stream. So we had to make choices on what's more important. So trees in the hierarchy are, I think, in the right place.
The smart trees.
The smart trees.
Okay.
Yeah.
And the reports have been modified over the last
months,
as you and Hunter have, and the comments, I think, from the board and from the public meeting.
Steep slopes went from 3 points to 6 points. Whether that's acceptable to the town is really...
It's logical.
Let me
I'm sorry, I didn't...
Steep slopes, just the whole way they did it. Stormwater, rivers and streams are most important. Trees are the second, and then there's discussion that steep slopes was given a higher number.
It started at 3 points and it went to 6 after the public comment period. And ephemeral channels went from non-existent to, I think, 3 points.
Can you tell us what one of the problems I have is this nutrient credit? That makes me uncomfortable. Tell me how come you're doing that.
Answer that, nutrient credits. I can just say that in the original Jordan Lake rules, nutrient credits were allowed because you could buy down nitrogen in somewhere else, in a bank. Because this is a voluntary issue with Chatham Park, that's a question that I can't answer how this works, which might touch on your mitigation comment too. I'm not sure.
Well, I think those banks are still available.
Banks are
still
available.
selling credits.
I think so.
Yeah.
Still works the same way.
Can you just explain that?
Well, let's say I'll try the best I can. A particular development would exceed the nutrient requirements. You can purchase some credits against that to reduce it down to meet the standards. Some credits that have already been established. You pay money into a fund and you purchase credits that have been established by organizations that do certain mitigations on streams or what have you to build up those credits. And that's where they come from.
So tell me how Chatham Park might use that.
Well, let me make one clarifying statement too. You can't buy yourself out of doing it. You've got to get to a threshold. It's not the easiest thing to get to that threshold. And once you're in nutrient export, so there's a way to calculate
Export nutrients that we would
the recycle
recycle
in the pollutant, wherever.
Wherever it goes, yeah.
Yeah.
But Commissioner Fiocco, I mean, that is right. I mean, you can't buy down the whole thing. It's a spread there between a certain minimum and then the other minimum for meeting the requirement. Again, this requirement doesn't exist right now.
It's what the government determines is the best level, but then you can avoid having to meet those levels.
But the mitigation that you purchase is to a project somewhere else in the watershed.
No, it could be in the whole Cape Fear.
But it's been 3 sub-watersheds.
Can that be
Right?
downriver?
You've got the Hall, lower Hope and Upper Hope.
No, it could actually be down near Wilmington.
No, it can't.
I think it has to be at the
No, it has to
Jordan
be
Lake watershed.
in the.
I don't think so.
Yes, it
It's
does.
27 pounds.
And in fact, it's got to be in the Jordan Lake watershed. And you've got 3 subbases. It's pretty clear, but we can get clarity. And the value of the mitigation project gets less and less the further you go from Jordan Lake. So that if the only available bank to purchase from is in Greensboro, you got to spend a lot more dollars than if it's here in Pittsburgh.
Yeah, but if they have a lot of money, then they can somebody can get it.
If
The
I-
idea is mitigation within the watershed that ultimately flows to Jordan Lake.
If I may, it brings up actually a great point to why we looked at this as sub-watersheds. For one of those very reasons, because just with the watershed element that we're proposing, and to get to 120, if you get to 120, you're already going to be meeting nitrogen and phosphorus. Maybe not at that level, but it does not allow you to come in here and, if we came in here and said, okay, we didn't have that and we scored 60 points or something like that, but doing that by a watershed basis and getting to the 120 requirement, you're already having to meet nitrogen and phosphorus. Just inherit how it's set up and doing that. So it would not really allow you to even do that.
So tell me how that is being exceptional. How does that meet the criteria to be exceptional? Like,
One thing on nutrient doing that is it's not required at all. And Chatham Park has made that commitment to meet the nitrogen and phosphorus requirements.
It's very exceptional. It's not required. We're doing it.
so then you wouldn't need this thing to buy it from somewhere else.
Correct.
So why-
And we don't anticipate. It's written, the language is taken from the state when this was still required by the state. It's the same language, and that's the reason it's in there.
So maybe it could be taken out.
Yeah, and we can talk about that.
In my experience, it's a really valuable tool to have. No, it is, because some projects are simply unable to do it on their own site, no matter how many non-structural or structural BMPs you throw at the equation.
I think it's just about the Haw River, and it makes me sad to think they could dump more into the Haw River by protecting some other spot.
Then getting somewhere else that isn't our future
We
drinking
have no
water
control
spot.
over it.
Well, no, it's all in the same watershed that we drink from.
We need to figure out that.
They consider just taking it out. It's a Chatham Park, but they don't need it, so.
We'll look at that. I'm not making a commitment to take that out at this point. I think it's valuable. The overall effect on the watershed is not harmful.
So this language about this mitigating factor is straight from the Jordan Lake watershed regulations?
I believe so. I'll have to look at it again. that's a little more technical thing that I need to look at without just responding off the top of my head.
And I will look at, I will try to learn more about this
All right, how can we order the questioning? We seem to be working first with the exceptional design evaluation. Is that what we have been basically concentrating on so far?
That's what your questions have been related to, I believe.
Yeah. Shall we go document by document and?
Whatever you prefer.
Okay. And how? There were 3 things that Rachel Thorne suggested be codified, and some of it I see here on page 10 on site stabilization. And
now, which document are you from?
The exceptional design evaluation.
Okay.
And I'm seeing language on page 11 about the extra silt fencing that we had talked about. But I hadn't seen any language about requiring hydro mulch, which was something, and truck washing stations, which may not fall into the stormwater category, but it was, but Fred, I was thinking that those were 3 things that Rachel had suggested that we were looking at having in site stabilization.
Correct, that's where they would go. They'd go right in.
Okay. Then
what would you repeat those 2?
The 3 things are having truck washing stations at each site to stabilize it. What they call super silt fencing.
Yes, that's in there. Yeah, the doubling, the silt fencing with the total slopes.
And then hydro mulch. There's some really wonderful language about how sites have to be stabilized within 7 days, which is very admirable. Rachel had suggested that hydro mulch was a very good material that could be laid down almost immediately and could really do a tremendous amount towards site stabilization. And I was hoping that we could see that codified in that site stabilization section on page 10 and 11.
Well, while we're talking about erosion control measures and the points that are ascribed for those measures, clearly those are during construction, and their performance is based on how they function in the field. And I think there's a section in here that talks about commissioning, which I think of as reconciliation. It seems to me that a project that says I'm going to get 10 points for these exceptional erosion control measures, if they don't get put in the field, if they don't perform, there are notices of violation, those points should not be awarded. So
that's fair.
I know a lot of the points are front-loaded. You see them to get zoning compliance, but those points can't possibly exist yet because you haven't put it in the field.
That would only be a proposal at site plan.
Right.
You couldn't verify it till construction.
So it would seem to me that those, you could not rely on those points to get you over the hump, or you would be at risk of not getting a CO.
Indeed, you would.
Okay, undisturbed buffer around wetlands. Does the board think that we need an undisturbed buffer around wetlands in ours, both in the UDO and in this particular element or section of the element?
So I'll say that I don't. And one of the reasons is the same reason I have for my ideas on ephemerals, that part of the county's goal in their comprehensive plan states that in order to preserve the rural character of the county, that's one of the best ways to do that is to develop densely in the towns, in these municipalities where you've got water and sewer systems. And those ideas are more akin to a rural environment where we're trying to create a suburban and urban environment.
So maybe we need to look at certain areas, maybe we don't protect them, but consider particular
And I think maybe there are
I
points
think
for that.
stormwater pool,
Right.
and you have to look at it not as that.
No, I agree. And I think there are points for doing that kind of stuff.
You're talking about something beyond just wetland, is that correct? And you're talking about additional areas around the wetland? There's not. There's recommended five.
See, in my mind, what makes the density interesting, attractive, and exceptional would be its proximity to well-protected special environmental features.
People do like that, but it's nice to have, within the dense urban areas, to have some natural areas, pockets, and it's a natural way to create these kind of little mini parks in there.
And I'm not opposed to increasing density off of that buffer. I would just eliminate all the suburban and just go urban and have lovely wetlands and keep our ephemerals.
But we limited our building height to 8 stories.
Let's revisit it. Let's revisit that.
Well, there wasn't when we started the budget.
There
I
is
don't
some
recall
master plan.
exactly how it got in there. I don't
With
recall.
discussions and meetings.
Yeah, I know, but I don't remember how it went.
I don't object. I'd rather have this and have more open space than be trading with. You know, now greater height in exchange for more people.
Ken Eagle, on page 2, I can just feel that this is a Ken Eagle.
Which document?
We're still on the design evaluation.
Okay.
Next to the last paragraph about watershed scores. The requirement to maintain a minimum watershed score does not replace or override, and at one point there were ordinances talked about there, but then you changed it to applicable legal requirements. Was that in an effort to take in more documentation or less?
It broadens it.
Broadens it.
Actually, I believe this was mostly Hunter's language, not mine, so.
That sounds like a legalese.
Rubbing off on. Yeah.
Elisa, is there any particular reason why we shouldn't give more points for steep slopes in the river corridor and ephemeral channels kept in place?
We've worked on these point systems for a long time and had feedback both from Fred, we worked with NC State, so we really tried to take in community input to assign those scores. And the reason steep slopes are where they are is because there often are next to buffers and things like that. And so again, we're talking about all these triple dipping, double dipping. It's where we increased it, but it's still going to be meeting or gaining points in other areas like riparian buffers in those areas.
What's the definition of a steep slope?
We have defined it, 20%, and a contiguous area of about an acre, I think. Yeah, but 20%.
Okay, so there is an area requirement for it to qualify. It's not just...
I'm not sure that that's in there.
Okay, I think it wants to be, because not an incidental 10 square feet of steep slope gets you points.
Right. I would have to look at the...
We're suggesting that the steep slope should be redefined, that it would be... This is what this is written. This is suggested by Burmassa. She's talking about steep slope. She said steep slope protection is another important component in protecting water resources from erosion. The current master plan protects slopes greater than 20%. Protection of slopes greater than 10% or 15% would provide greater stability to soil and reduce erosion. That was her recommendation.
That would fix that question.
We were just discussing soil type as being an important factor of slopes as well.
So I read that earlier this afternoon. Soil type would handle the steep slope. It's very difficult to administer 15%, 20%, 25%, but if you just have the soil overlay map and you can know what type of soil it is, if it's the highly erodible type and there's a number associated with that, then that has more criticality than the other type of soil. So that's something it could be noted for the next round.
Fred, if I can, I'd like to repeat and see if I'm doing active listening here and see if I get you right, because I think I've heard Carl Schaefer say similar things in the planning board. I think I heard you suggest that maybe the next round of improvements we might look at a soil type map being overlaid on suspected steep slopes or on steep slopes. And if there are highly erodible soils in play, then those should be given extra protection than a non-erodible soil type.
Or higher points.
Higher points.
Yeah.
Higher points.
There's an index of soils that is relatively, it's in the soil survey.
Yes.
The Channel County Soil Survey.
Yes.
It's in that. It's data.
Is that more detailed than whatever the USGS?
Yes, much more. It's called the Soil Market, or the Soil Mart. It's online.
Okay.
And it's got
Not behind a paywall.
erodibility. USDA. Soil Mart. It's called Soil.
Feel like a good break time that would allow us to sort of garner our questions in a little bit more organized fashion. I'm feeling like we're flaring.
We're saying things and then nothing's really.
Or maybe that's me. Well, I think Kim Eagle is taking copious notes over there about things that we've said that we'd like to change or think about or reinsert or, right?
I am taking many notes.
I am taking many notes and comments.
Moved by Michael Fiocco, seconded by John Bonnet. Those in favor, please stand and take a 5-minute break. Is there a motion to convene our session? Moved by Michael Fiocco, seconded by John Bonnet, to be back in session. And during the break, the board and folks out there were all mingling and talking, and it is 10:15. I'm wondering, Michael Fiocco says he has additional questions. I have some. I think John Bonnet does, and I would just solicit a discussion here among us about whether we feel that this is something that we could put to bed tonight, or whether we need to put ourselves to bed and continue the discussion another time. What does the board feel?
I am ready to move on and continue. I've invested a lot of time this weekend. Spent a lot of time doing this when I wanted to be doing other things, and I'm ready to say my piece.
I'm not ready. I can't absorb anything else tonight.
I would just like to say what's on my mind, and I know Chatham Park has spent many meetings in this. Fred, thank you for all your hard work. Really appreciate it very much. We're going to miss you. With that said, I really have strong feelings that I feel like we should pass this through Hydrostructure for a week, let them review it, come back with the board or Chatham Park with any suggestions, and come back into the board in 2 weeks. That's my suggestion to the board. I mean, because we still probably got another hour here, and I think we're dragging our feet. This would be a way for me to feel comfortable and be ready to vote.
I hear what you're saying, and I don't disagree with you. It's just that we keep coming to these meetings, and we would like to get all the questions so we can address all the questions. And I know it's late, but if you could give us the questions either verbally or read them out so we could get them, then we can answer them. And so in 2 weeks we can come back and present a complete element and complete design manual to you for a vote. What I hate to do is come back next week and you got 100 more questions, and then it goes for another month, and it's been like that for 2.5 years. So we would like to hear the question. I know it's late, but if you could give us questions, or give us in writing your questions, we'll be glad to answer them so that we don't get the same thing next 2 weeks.
But we do have to find, there's always been a lot of changes made to each of these documents, so to act like we're the ones dragging this out, there's been always a lot of changes, and it's to be expected that we would need time to go over all the new things in here again. Just want to throw that out.
I agree. And we have asked many times that you email your questions to us so that we could have them answered before the meetings so that we don't get into these long 11 o'clock meetings. We would appreciate your email your questions to us.
Part of the challenge is that this is very complex.
And we need to discuss it with each other, so
The discussions are very beneficial and very helpful, and none of us have the expertise, frankly, that is needed to refine this and to ensure the public good. So it's understandable to me why there is an iterative process. I understand your frustration with it as well, but there were very substantial changes with this draft, and there are tremendous improvements, I'll also note. But I agree with several commissioners that I'm just too tired tonight to continue. But I'll be happy to try and get my comments to you in writing as quickly as I can.
Well, why don't we do this then? Michael Fiocco has his questions, he's always well organized, and I feel like we need to honor the fact that he was nose to the grindstone over the weekend. So why don't we address his?
Well, I'll tell you, if it is the will of the board to put these in writing, I'll be happy to do that tomorrow.
I'd like to hear what you have to say.
Well, I think
there's
I
an
will
amount of
copy.
interchange. There's interchange that helps us to understand.
Yeah.
Yeah. Would you?
Is that okay with you?
Oh, yeah. What? If the board said let's go, we can go. Go listen to it.
Not make any votes, but at least get all the questions out.
Yeah, at least get all the questions.
Can I just say one thing? We're talking about an element, we're talking about a design manual. 99% of the questions have been about the design manual.
True.
Can we clear up what questions may be on the element and then jump to the design manual instead of jumping back and forth? Because the element seems to be okay. It's just design manual people got 100 questions on it. Is that, Mr. Fiocco, is that?
That's fine. Yep.
So focus on
The element.
I'm on the element right now. So one of my questions we've already covered, and that was the fact that the scoring occur at site plan, subdivision plan, not construction drawing plan. I think that this is addressed maybe somewhere else, but I ran across it, and it talks about the annual maintenance and inspection report, and the town needs to have a copy of that whenever it is done. And it simply says each inspection report shall meet the requirements outlined in 401B of the town's storm water ordinance. And I would suggest that we add and be provided to the town stormwater administrator. Oh, I think that's part of these other documents, the scoring sheet, not the element. The element says this is what you got to do.
Okay.
I was on page 5. And it's not a grammatical, but a word play. Operation and maintenance agreement, third line down, page 6. Sorry. Says all types of SEMs in Chatham Park which may shall. I think you want to say may.
This is under,
The operation and maintenance agreement, the last.
agreement, I'm sorry, looking at the wrong place.
Yeah, the last paragraph.
Yes, thank
third
you.
line.
Yeah.
The SEM access on page 7, top of the page, says that each SEM shall be accessible out of directly, blah, 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 and shall be recorded at the Register of Deeds. And what I think we want to do is that only one plat get recorded, so that the town has an easement that's going to go over the SCM and access to it for the town's ability to access and maintain if everything goes haywire. And so I don't want to see us recording two plats. One for the benefit of the homeowners association and one for the town.
Not sure it contemplates two plats. It's just a plat for an access easement.
Yeah. But, so make sure that the easement provides the town the access rights. And I think I was talking with Paul a little bit this afternoon about the maintenance covenant that is required to be recorded prior to issuance. I don't know if it's prior, but you have to, after approval of the stormwater discharge permit.
So if we add access easement to the town, does that take care of it?
I think as long as the plat is providing access to the town.
Yeah.
As well as the homeowners association.
That's what it says.
Well, it doesn't say to the town. But I mean, your ordinance deals with that.
Right, okay.
Certainly we can add that, if that takes care of it. Or an access easement to the town shown on the plan. Top page 7, would that satisfy?
I think so.
Okay.
I think I know the answer to this, but I'll ask the question. It says that in their maintenance security, the second paragraph of maintenance security, says no funds from an escrow account shall be used to pay for inspection and minor maintenance of the SCM or required inspection reporting requirements. So how is that funded and who's paying for it?
That comes out of other property owners' assessments. The escrow fund, of course, being only for major repairs.
Just for major.
Yes.
So dues will cover the other minor ongoing maintenance.
A related question. So what if we are, this is a work in progress, so if we have a stormwater element that's not working in the future, who pays for that?
We use a stormwater element.
Well, no,
Twice.
this whole thing, we're not exactly sure how it's going to pan out. So what if something isn't working? Something else has to be done.
You mean like rewriting the document?
You mean like an actual...
So the dam fails.
That would be a major repair,
Right.
I think, under anybody's
Come out of the
interpretation. Yes. Well, the property owners pay for it.
Right.
It comes out of assessments, or out of this major repair fund that's established, if it's a major repair. If it's something minor, I mean, if a dam broke, yeah, I mean, that's a major repair, obviously. If you had a pipe that had to be replaced, that's in the nature of a minor repair. Or inspections are not covered by the escrow fund, that's also just out of other homeowners' assessments. Or property owners, I shouldn't say just homeowners, because it's, excuse me, residential and non-residential that are paying into the assessment.
So remind me, the escrow account, is that's funded by a project?
Yes.
15%?
Yes.
And within 5 years?
Yes.
So how does a project find itself obligated to pay 5 years when it's been after it's been operating for 5 years, a hefty sum of money?
You mean after the account's been funded the first time?
I thought the contribution from a project to the fund didn't have to occur for 5 years.
Oh, I see what you're saying. That's a good question.
I mean, usually the big hammer and hook is the CO.
Well, if something's going to fail, it doesn't usually fail within the first 5 years, does it?
Right.
I mean, wasn't that the rationale behind doing it this way?
Yeah, but I'm asking how do you get
Yeah, I know what
motivated
you're
for the
asking.
next 5 years
Yeah.
later. I mean, they probably sold the property to somebody
Could
else
have.
already.
Could have.
I mean, it's a real practical problem.
Yeah. Think about that one a little bit.
This is just something that struck me as odd. On page 8, the last sentence of the second paragraph, it says individual development sites which meet required stormwater standards on site shall be identified on the watershed map.
I'm sorry, I was writing.
Sorry, second paragraph, page 8.
Under section 7?
No, it's right above it.
Oh, okay.
Last sentence of that paragraph.
So the map would show if an individual site is meeting it on its own, is meeting the standards without being part of the watershed.
It would also show the
It's part of the watershed too, but it would show if it's meeting its.
But it's also going to show the ones that aren't.
Well,
is there something special here?
I think the intent was to indicate which ones are meeting it on site as opposed to, on the sub-watershed level.
Throughout the sub-watershed, rather than being averaged.
Yes, I think that's the intent of this.
Well, each project's going to contribute to the overall score. So you're just saying that the particular sites are going to be acknowledged to have this special characteristic?
If it does, yeah.
Okay. Trying to make sense of my notes. Oh, okay. I think I was just thinking out loud about writing about a statement here that all development projects within Chatham Park shall complete the exceptional design evaluation worksheet and submit to the stormwater program manager prior to requesting construction drawing approval. And I think I was just writing notes about the sequence in my mind. So I'm thinking that the developer must submit to the development review committee prior to site plan and subdivision plans, and to the stormwater program manager prior to construction drawings.
Where are you now? I'm sorry. Is that your just thinking? Oh, okay.
Yeah, I'm having gone
Well,
through.
you had said earlier the data should be submitted at the time of site plan or subdivision plan submitted.
Correct.
Rather than construction.
Right. So that changes.
I think it should be part of
what
this
you've got there.
zoning compliance sequence. Yeah. Okay. I suspect they're still going to submit construction drawings.
We'll have to show if you're going to do a structural B&P, you certainly would have to.
Yeah, that'll go to the stormwater program manager before it goes to the tenant.
Yeah, everything's got to
Right.
be vetted. So.
Okay.
Now, I don't know. Let me pause for a minute. Now, I don't know that we would review the actual construction plans to build a stormwater pond. But what the program manager would be reviewing is whether there should be a stormwater pond, and what the proposed stormwater pond, how it's sized, and that sort of thing. But the actual construction drawings, I don't think we would be necessarily reviewing that. That's more of something that would just be coming in with the town, like the street construction plans and the water line, the sewer line, and those type of plans. We would be reviewing, as I said, the sizing and whether it's appropriate for the development just being proposed. Whether if somebody came in and they proposed a stormwater pond, but our stormwater program manager said, well, no, this is a site that's part of a regional stormwater pond that's going to be over here, so you don't need that structural. That's the kind of thing I believe that our development review committee and the stormwater program manager would be looking at, but not getting into necessarily the details of the actual how it's going to be constructed.
How that played out with the signage. I think all the signage.
Well, the development review committee wouldn't necessarily look at how the actual construction is going to occur. We look at the size, the color, the font type, where it's going to be located.
So a developer would not need a letter from the stormwater manager
To submit construction drawings?
Right.
I don't know why he would. I mean, Jeff could weigh in on that if he thinks.
I mean, we're going to definitely need something from Hunter as the stormwater program manager that says Chatham Park is good with these devices.
And I think you can get that at site plan.
Yeah, you're going to come in with the watershed map and it'll be reviewed to see what the points are or proposed. Again, something like a double silt fence, you can't get those points.
But if the site plan says a wet pond and a construction drawing comes in with a wet pond, good, we're good. If it comes out with something different, well,
If there's no wet pond and you come in with one, then that's a problem.
Well, and then could you have a wet pond and decide to go with something else, go to construction drawing and change the point?
I think you'd have to come back. You have to come back to us first on that.
Yeah, I think Chatham Park would have to be involved, and then if it was a significant change, that might be a major amendment to that site plan or something. That might have to get picked up with you guys, or if it's, we can, I don't know how to quantify what major or minor is at the moment, but a minor.
But you'll know it when you see it.
Well, Fred and I talked about that today. I think there should be some language, if not implied, specified in the element, is that whenever the stormwater administrator for the town feels uncomfortable with the change, it comes to you guys. However minor Chatham Park might feel it is. We're uncomfortable with it, but we're not going to.
A change in what?
The manual.
Oh, okay, well.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. Yeah, not the element, sorry.
Yeah, that's all, that's why I was.
I know.
Yeah.
I was just using that as an
That's all I had on the element.
Did anyone else have any
I just have
comments on the element?
One quick clarifying question. Does the state require control of the first half inch or the first inch? There's one.
1.5 at the beach.
Right.
1.5 if you're east of I-95. So that's the only difference.
1.5 where he's headed.
We get floods. We will have flooded streets.
The performance review will determine whether or not there has been an increase in peak flow pre-eclipse stuff, right? That's the whole purpose behind the point system, is there'll actually be a determination that no, there has been no increase in peak flow.
That comes in with the stormwater packet, application packet, and the calculations to show how well that's met. It comes in spreadsheets.
Theoretically.
Yeah, it comes in spreadsheets.
But you're talking about the check issues.
Yeah.
Oh, you mean?
The actual device, is it performing as the calculation?
That comes around with the annual inspection.
Actually, okay.
So we're talking about the 6 months, right?
Yeah.
Well, and I also think it comes with the as-built.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, if you're supposed to have a 4-foot deep pond that gets built at 2 feet,
Yeah.
you know,
No, it's not
that's a problem.
There's no expense that they're working on those during construction.
Right.
Yeah, you couldn't know that before.
Does the board have any further questions? You're prepared to receive any further questions? And let us say, can we put this back on the agenda for 2 weeks from now with any intervening questions to come upcoming this week? Can we say that?
And can we ask that anybody with missed questions on the board share them with everybody?
Share some with everybody else.
Right.
And with staff, too.
And with staff. Thank you. Okay, are we ready? Thank you.
Ms. Reed, I actually have a recommendation to make, or just a comment to make. When we are going over things such as this, I prefer for this to be the main thing on the agenda, because a lot of members of the public, they're gone. And there are things which they probably would like to hear also. So to try to not have as much on the agenda that we have to do, so that the public can also hear about this. That's just what I'm saying. They're gone.
Okay. Well, then that takes us to, just leave? Is that what I heard? This takes us to the only item of new business, which is the Chatham Park additional element of affordable housing. You all received from me this past week a email that set forth the idea that we need to move these last few elements. And one of them we need to move is affordable housing. And we need to move it in such a way that we're not just moving it for moving the sake, but we're moving it because we feel that we're at a point where we can get together ideas and pull them into the element. So my proposal was that we have a task force. This is not intended to be a delay of any sort. It's intended to be something that brings us to a path forward. So far, among the people I've spoken with, two planning board members have accepted the idea of being on the task force, Frida Olson and Brian Taylor. Jim Nass has agreed to be the facilitator. Chatham Park has agreed that Chuck Smith and Tim Smith would serve from their standpoint. We need to find 2 board members from this board that would be interested in serving on this task force to maintain quality. And Jerry Wharton called this afternoon to say that he would like to be on that task force as well. And I was looking basically at 2, 4, 6, 8 people to be on that task force. That's a reasonable size, and with Pamela Baldwin, even though she's about to go to sleep now, would you consider being on that since you're the liaison from this board to the county? And I was thinking that we needed somebody that was interested in expediting this, and Michael Fiocco and I had a conversation that basically said that I think he basically told me that you didn't feel like this needed to be expedited.
No. Well, let me say that I felt as though the ball was clearly in Chatham Park's court. And I am willing to participate in this task force.
Is there anybody else that wishes to serve on the task force that might,
Oh, this subject is very dear to me.
Very dear to you.
And I want to solve it.
Okay. Well, and I was thinking also about the fact that Wilson Solar used to be in the habitat realm. I didn't know if that would be something that would be of interest to you, that, or to, or shall we? I mean, it don't all need to be of like mind. We don't need to be clones of one another.
I
And
think that's cool. I think Habitat is going to be represented. That's my background.
Okay.
Michael has worked with Bruce and Barbara, and that brings perspective that I think would be that professional.
Chapel Hill.
Oh, yeah, that would be wonderful. It was.
Yes, I think that it should bring a lot of ideas.
I've got a fair amount of experience with different ideas.
If you turn out that you don't listen, then I would have to say that it sounds like you did something different for thinking about opportunity with Habitat.
I'm really, in a sense, looking for somebody else from the broader community, and if you all would give me the opportunity to appoint that person, I don't know that the board needs to approve this task force or not, or whether I have authority to do it. Just calling them to address this issue and to do it as quickly as possible, and to do it with grace and with humor and with expedition.
Pam, when is the county's board expected to complete its work?
Yeah, just get rid of it. I would say a year. What do you think, Mr. Bruce?
I'm sorry, I didn't hear all of it.
How long do you think the county will, it'll take for the county to complete?
It's going to be at least a year.
I think it will be at least a year.
This part will be.
Because they have really not gotten the time. So, they're just exploring different ideas at this point.
And this is ownership as opposed to the previous board.
Yes. Yes. So that's going to certainly say it'll be a lot more in depth.
So if the board gives me authority to appoint one more member of the committee to give an additional viewpoint of this, other than the elected officials and the appointed board members and volunteers.
Good. I think that this would be beneficial to the county.
Well, I'm fully expected to be there.
Okay.
If I'm invited.
Point that again.
No, I don't have to be appointed, I'll just be there.
We just need
Yeah.
Consider somebody that-
Either Brian or myself. Or I will.
That's a nice idea. That suggests you have somebody that will represent the senior community.
Dennis Reese.
Council on Aging? That is true.
I was also very impressed and embarrassed that I cannot remember her name, but the woman who lives in RBTJ, and she works in Chapel Hill, and our friend from Habitat said that she would be more effective than three of them or something like that. Yeah.
Susan Levy.
Right.
Levy.
Betty.
Yeah, she's going to have that in Chapel Hill.
She'd be a good
A depth of experience beyond Habitat.
Right. No, she's, I actually was kind of telling a conference with her, she's really sharply. The possibility would be, Penny Lane is getting ready to start all their board meetings now with their generations on
made on accessory language. I think that is going to accrue to more stocks on affordable housing, but it's not going to happen rapidly. It'll happen organically.
And I'll mention one other thing is, Corey had mentioned all these other standards associated with it, but I'm not sure. I want to talk to Jeff about this as to whether or not those actually came with this text amendment, because those are listed underneath special use permit.
Yeah, we just cleaned it up.
I know, right, and so I've got notes as to how to clean it up, but one of the things I wanted to do was not carry them over wholesale, because one of the requirements is that the parcel be 1.5 times the required size. We've got a ton of lots out there right now that are not 1.5 times, but can accommodate it. And we are really restrict the number of units if we stick with that standard.
Yeah, we can talk about it.
Yeah.
You know, another problem with that accepted is there are a lot of students who have conflicts with families or whatever and just have nowhere to go. Like Becky had like 4 kids in high school kids and nowhere to go.
There is
another element.
There is actually a group that's working on that now in Travis County about homeless children. So they are working on it. And they're going to bring that information into the Chatham County Affordable Housing Committee. They're going to bring that in and present that to, so probably incorporate that.
That's a big problem. Nobody will talk about it.
No.
That's right.
Well,
Mayor.
One question I'd like to see on that might be school of government.
Tyler Mulligan.
Yeah.
Well, hope that he's not going to be able to do it.
Well,
But I'm sure he would do a presentation. Would he be willing to do that?
even that. School of government.
all right, thank you. Then we have the manager's update.
I've been having computer problems all night. There's calls report that kind of jammed me up a little bit somehow. Computer did that all. I will re-email you the report just because there's a couple items I'll mention to you right now. The retreat is, we do have a facilitator or moderator for the retreat. I worked with the School of Government to come up with a recommendation. Her name's Madeline Henley, Walking Stick Associates. She's worked with some folks at School of Government that apparently our board has worked with in the past. So she's a little bit familiar with this. And I've had a couple pretty good conversations, and I can forward you more information on her. But the format being basically the same as what we've looked at and talked about to this point, which is a couple hours tops for staff, and then the rest of the time being basically we're coming up with vision stuff for the board. So, that's it. I have the schedule from 8 to 5 at the Ag Center. So that's where we left it last. And then I can also go into some of the personnel changes and go over kind of revisit during my portion the organizational chart. But I mentioned in the report that we did manage to appoint Jamie McLaurin as the wastewater treatment plant superintendent, removing the interim tag. We had that posting open, received one other application for it. We think Jamie's in the best position to do that. Sliding into Jamie's old spot, I believe we better not say anything about this yet until it's absolutely confirmed. We had an employee over there that was working part-time that had planned on retiring, but I think he was planning on coming back. Sliding into Jamie's position
also mention that, and this is probably going to take a little bit more diagramming, but the open inspector position that we had open, we're essentially refilling that by sliding a couple of people forward, one being Andrew McGrain, who's been working as basically utility worker in charge of maintaining and exercising our valves and hydrants. We've mentioned in the past that he's been getting more into the GIS mapping of our infrastructure and kind of cataloging all that information that we get from hydrostructures and from other consultants through as-bills that they're required to give us. So he's taking on some additional responsibilities there, also taking on the primary responsibility for inspections. And then we're, in all likelihood, looking to slide someone into the part-time position, or from a part-time position into a full-time position for the other partially working on inspections, but also doing some of the stuff that Andrew used to do with the valves and the hydrants. So essentially creating what in effect should be two pretty solid inspector positions, whereas before we didn't really have any. So it's pretty good. And then I mentioned that Fred is taking a job in Wilmington, and much sadness, but I'm sure he'll represent us well there. And then also too, well, I guess I'll leave it at that. So, lots of work to do in the upcoming meetings. Schedule-wise, I do, Mayor Pro Tem Baldwin mentioned as far as the agendas are concerned, I have been trying to give pretty good thought to how much information we load into the agendas every week. As it was, I think we took 2 items off of this agenda for this week to do it, and I think that's why one of the reasons we saw 10 items on consent agenda, which I'm normally not real comfortable doing, but I figured you guys were familiar with the issues, and if you did have any questions, as always, you can pull those off. So, but yeah, definitely we'll keep that in mind moving forward.
Thank you. I know you always have a lot to get on there.
It's always a lot of stuff, especially when we're coming across it the first time. So, that's all I got.
Yeah, and almost all this involved, all this. All right. Commissioner concerns, Jay Farrell?
I never did hear anybody to respond to my comment regarding hydrostructure, so I would leave it up to the board if they want to pass the hydrostructure or talking to deaf ears.
I second that.
You can go with hydrostructure, so I don't have a problem.
Take care of that, Mr. Bennett.
What does hydrostructure do exactly?
Going over this stormwater additional elements.
Sure.
I think if they're going to do it, they need to have some guidance, right?
They make it friendly, start together.
Honestly, because coming at it cold, that'd be hard to do.
Sure.
When are you leaving?
What time is it?
I'll be around 2 weeks after Friday.
And just another note on hydrostructures there, just in case it comes up, one of the 5 remaining. The hydrostructures will be responsible in the interim for doing plan review. Plans to come in. So they're in a position to do that. So just going to basically work them into rotation as far as plan review is concerned. So they've done it for us before, and they'll be able, I think, to do it for us again as well.
So we're in agreement on the hydrostructures reviewing. Do we need to have that as a vote? No. That?
I had been to think about the Clyde Jones Garden, that's already been mentioned. The only other thing I've heard is that, this is on Facebook, that someone wrote and said that they would like to see our meetings videotaped at some point, so people can, so it can be more transparent and reach more people. So that's something to aspire to.
On that note, I know several jurisdictions that have the video, have the audio, and in their minutes section of the report, recordings, it identifies that what certain items were discussed, so you don't have to sit there and scroll through and say, oh, I want to see the additional elements conversation. Mr. Fred, I'm glad you're here. Do we have the modeling software for our water system, or do we rely on?
We can get it, we pay for it.
You got it. Okay.
We can get it. We don't have the
We're not downstream.
software to run it.
You mean the hardware to run it?
Consultants have the software to run it. It's an
So we don't have
AutoCAD
it in-house?
extension. No, it's an AutoCAD extension that's used for the
Water model? So we've got a lot of the data.
We have all the data.
We just aren't running models right now.
Right.
On our own.
We're getting it all in GIS. And, well, on the pressure side, we don't have the model data. We can get printouts. We just don't have the software to run those models.
So we would need to invest in the software.
Yes.
Hydrostructures has the data that I think the town has paid for.
If they have the original data, the most updated data is McKim and Creed and McGill. Those two. McGill's got the county-town combination model, and McKim and Creed has the town model when they did the northern system.
So are they really accessible as far as you calling them up and saying, model this quadrant for me or this section for me? Oh, yeah? So maybe that's more cost effective than doing it.
Yeah, you'd have to buy the software, the license, train somebody.
Keep it updated.
Oh, yeah. Okay, that's all. Thanks.
I don't have anything, but one question. You were going to find out some information about the dam over there. Did we ever find out any information about that?
The Hall River Dam? Yes.
So,
Question two.
because, I know they said that you had to get it from the federal government.
Yeah, you're going to have to get a security clearance for him to tell you the answer.
Okay.
Have to go in another room.
We're going to have to go into closed session.
Okay.
That's actually.
It's pretty true.
Okay.
I met with a federal FERC engineer out there and with Andrew McMahon, who's applied for the FERC hydro license. And we looked at it. And we can't read those documents or look at those files until we get that, it's called a CEII approval from FERC in Washington, D.C. We're in line to get it. And I asked her, the engineer, to please put in a good word for us, because we want to see all this stuff.
That's all I have. Thank you. Somebody?
So, that document request is in place, but from town or from you as town engineer?
We're registered. The town is-
I thought the ability to look at critical infrastructure documents was tied to an individual.
It's the town of Pittsburgh. My name might be in there. I could get Terry to, Terry, our office administrators, the one who could help me.
I need to add more to your to-do list before you leave town, but I would appreciate that, because I heard from somebody else that we had, I think maybe a side conversation. You weren't terribly worried about it because of the height or the depth of the intake, but I heard the contrary information. It's actually worrisome that if the dam did fail, that we would lose water, so.
It's pretty, I think it's like 15 feet below the top of the dam, roughly.
The dam is only about 10 feet deep. But, I mean, just driving by, it looks like 10 feet high.
It's the back of it's deep.
In Holland, we clean out every couple of years.
Right.
And dig in that area there too. So that doesn't ever dry up, just by nature of us maintaining it. So,
Okay.
Yeah, I'll double check the name. I might have to make sure.
Yeah, it was frozen all the way across the river.
That's right, the ice might be damaged. Perfect.
It might have cracked it.
So, that was on my list, but thank you. The other item, Frame's concerns. They actually were echoes of Chris Hinkle's email to this whole board 5 months ago, maybe 4 months ago, and Mayor was one of your top priorities when you were elected. That there was some decrepit properties throughout town, and I think it would be really good if we could develop a list and an action plan for those items. So I volunteered to make that list, but to the extent that Mr. Rusbeck and Mr. Jones will look at that list and say we can't do anything about A, B, and C, but we might be able to do this and that on D and E and F, that'd be great. I should have said this when Percy was still here. I got a complaint about speeding along Sanford Road near Log Cabin Road. Mr. Rusbeck, if you could mention that, please.
Yep.
Log Barn Road.
I actually addressed that a couple of years ago from some residents that lived on Log Barn, and I believe Percy had checked into that through DOT, the speed limit there. The way it was, the population there had something to do with that. They did check into lowering it and changing it going out of town past Log Barn.
Okay.
So they
it
raised
actually comes in at 55 before you get
They did. Well, this
I
person
actually
said,
brought
I
it up
think she
because
said 35.
my dad was almost in an accident there, so I actually brought it up originally, and we went to DOT. My recollection that we were asking them to reduce the speed limit from the back, they actually.
Yeah.
Well, they gave them a whack-a-mole, but
Because they said they hadn't been any accidents, they're just gonna let us call, because people come flying over that hill, it's really dangerous sometimes.
Just that you got to be careful what you ask for with DOT sometimes, because when they do the traffic study, they'll take 85% of the speeds that go through there, and if 85% of the speeds are higher than what you guys want, see what direction that goes.
even if drivers are speeding, they will set the pace.
If 85% of the drivers are going at a certain speed safely, kind of where the speeding is kind of subjective.
Okay.
They're not looking into preventative.
I always say that.
I do too, but it doesn't work.
So that's what happened, that's actually what, they made it work.
Well, this brings me to my next item, actually, and it's Hillsborough Street, and I started a conversation, and I reached out to NCDOT, the district engineer, because I was curious about at what point they would have a public meeting. They're going to have a public meeting in April for Hillsborough Street widening project, and it will, thank you, Commissioner Baldwin, thank you, many others who have worked on it in the past too. I think starting around 2009, 2010, making that request, maybe earlier, making that request to DOT, and it is now very firmly in place that it should have 2 sidewalks, 2 bike paths, 2 travel lanes, and a 16-foot turn lane in the center. Altogether, 74-foot right-of-way. It's going to encroach on people's land, and it will likely have impacts on one or two of those houses. That's why I think the conversation needs to be started sooner than later, sooner than DOT would have to start the conversation. They very much appreciated my inquiry because he said, we'd like to fan the flames and get more people to turn out to that April event. Please help us with that. We want to hear this feedback and incorporate it. But I think it would behoove us to try to coordinate the stimulus because I know some folks just aren't comfortable going to a DOT meeting.
I saw your post. But I wonder if we should
Well,
have a Facebook page. But my question would be, it seems like the people who live on that street should be contacted first so they don't find out about those things.
Absolutely, yes.
So I'm all in favor of
I
putting
kind
that
of,
on the
I got in front of myself in that regard, but
Because I hate for them to find out that way. So,
I was a little bit nervous when this fellow said that we needed to know about this as soon as possible.
Yeah,
If there's any change in thoughts.
So maybe we can figure out what we need to do to alert the neighbors, and then we can put it on the warrant. Really get, we'll probably get a lot of, you've already gotten a lot of interest.
More than staff. We're supposed to be notified of that meeting They haven't talked
He
to us.
hasn't said it yet. He hasn't said it yet. He hasn't counted.
I knew it was happening in March or April, but even, April, I don't know April.
And at Tarpo, they just said this spring.
Right.
I don't know.
Well, once by the title was last August.
So what I'm suggesting is we can have a meeting.
No, we need to have their consultants at the meeting, so they can show the models. I mean, we would just be having a meeting to say, hey, Hillsborough Street's gonna be widening, but we need to have traffic consultants.
Yes, that'd be good.
Yeah. So you're saying have a meeting that we facilitate and they have to facilitate? They may not want to come to two meetings, I don't know.
If more people, we might get a better turnout if it was a preliminary meeting or just a church informal gathering or.
One meeting. That's kind of like that.
Yeah.
I'm not sure what the point, like, why would you have two? I just have one. You said some more people would come.
I just don't know what people would turn out to a
They would come, they would come, and you tell them that the thing about widening the street, and we want your input. And it may affect the property.
Yeah, I think John just wants to get.
Yeah.
Okay, if you think that will happen, I don't know why I had the impression they would.
I think and they'll be interested because there's different scenarios too. It's not it may not turn out to be sidewalks on both sides.
Yeah, they can almost just do one side and.
Yeah, that could be the scenario, because we have to pay for part of this too.
So.
Just to be clear, you guys wanted all of that.
Yeah. You want all of that, there's a price tag.
You told us once that you wanted all of that, so that's why we said they want all of that.
But we have scenarios of others.
So the next thing would be, how do we, what's the process? We don't have a date yet for that, but do we need to go ahead and let neighbors know that there's going to be something happening?
Why would we alert somebody to a meeting we don't know?
No, it's not just about the meeting, it's about, this is something that's going to happen. The meeting is sort of like, we can announce that later, but just to give them a heads up before they hear about it.
Well, there's been, back in last year, there was a significant surveying going on. If it was not last year, it was 18 months ago. So people know that, I think people along that stretch know that something's coming. And it's been talked about here and other places.
I think it's a nice urgency to let them know.
I think it would be a big time, because it's been so long.
Why don't I just contact DOT and say, let's get notice out?
Please don't put anything on the Facebook page until we have.
Yeah, let's get something from DOT that says the meeting is April 20th at this location, so we're not getting people confused as to when it is. But yeah, I mean, I fully expected to get some sort of notice any day now about this meeting. So, you know more than I do.
All right, Jeff, will I apologize for jumping the gun on you?
No, it's fine.
The reason it was brought to my attention was an activist from Durham, a cycle activist who, rather like me, has a bike, doesn't ride it often, would ride it often more if there were safe places to ride. He introduced me to this concept of a cycle track. And that's the idea where instead of having a bike path on both sides, you combine them on one side with a physical protection, a physical barrier, whether trees or planters or jersey wall or bollards, so that the parent with the stroller and a baby on board would feel comfortable traveling on that cycle track.
That has not been modeled or priced out.
Exactly. And his response was like I had lobsters crawling out of my nose. So, but 5 feet on this side, 5 feet on that side, plus or 10 feet on this side. He said it's going to increase our right-of-way needs, but that's not what the cycle track activists say. So,
okay.
Evidently, we have a conversation we need to have. I'm sorry.
One walkway down the road, but it's cycling, and then they have ballast, and then it's more narrow.
So, thank you.
All right, is there a motion to adjourn? closed session is not part of the proposal. Mike Kyoto made the motion, Pamela Baldwin seconded, those in favor, please stand.
You need